Hello, everyone. Omi-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn in JJK as Megumi? The Potential Man Part 4. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it. As the dust settled from Seism's shockwave, it revealed our heroes standing atop a morph battleground. The surface underneath them seemed to writhe and morph constantly, forcing them to keep moving around to more stable ground. Even in a passive form, this curse's abilities are troublesome, but not something my IQ of 530,000 cannot break apart. So far, it showed the ability to manipulate Earth at will. It may even be able to create from pure cursed energy if it so wished. It isn't safe to risk letting Itadobro fight it alone with no help in order to force him to land a black flash, so I'll follow him and make sure he doesn't get hurt. Todo immediately and accurately deduced. Brother! You will lead the charge, but I won't help you at all until you land a black flash. The rest of you just make sure not to die. He shouted out. Got it, Brodo! Yuji responded, running forwards followed shortly by his best friend. What dash? For real? These guys are so stupid. Nobara gawked at their stupidity while fighting a special grade curse. She shook her head and turned to her classmate beside her. Inumaki, what should we do? Do we listen to him? Salmon. Fish flakes. You're right, let's let them do their thing but watch over them to make sure they don't get hurt while taking shots at the curse when possible. She replied, having understood Inumaki's whole plan from only 3 words. I have an idea for something that could really put the hurt on that Seism dude, but it needs your help, Inumaki. Kujisaki asked, receiving a thumbs up in response which caused her to grin deviously. Yuji arrived in front of the disaster curse with a serious expression as he looked the curse up and down before surprising Seism immensely as instead of immediately attacking, he asked him a question. You can talk, so I wanna ask you this one thing. Do you know a human-shaped curse with patchwork face scars? Although his face seemingly held no emotions, his eyes betrayed a seething rage tempered by compassion. And if I do? What's it to you, Sukuna's vessel? Seism questioned, somewhat curious as to why he would choose to ask him about Mojito now. The ground beneath Yuji crumbled and exploded outwards in a shower of dirt and dust as he disappeared from his place, causing Seism to immediately look for him and try to stop any attacks. However, as he turned, 2 nails shot into both his eye sockets one after another, causing his head to be thrown backwards in pain. This act of teamwork left him wide open to attack from Itadori, who came in from the side and landed 3 consecutive kicks all aimed at the same spot, causing the special grade's thick armor to crack slightly, which didn't go unnoticed by Aoi Todo or Nobara Kujisaki. Seism recovered and waved with his hand, causing several spikes of rock to shoot out of the ground to impale the pink-haired teen. Despite his efforts, the spikes never reached their target, who actually grabbed onto the curse before him and used his arm as leverage to shift himself away from the attack and into an open blind spot of the curse. Itadori Yuji brought his arm back, his mind being filled with the atrocities that Mojito had performed against humans not too long ago. His anguish at the suffering of all those people and even of his once friend Junpei, it all angered him beyond anything he thought he'd ever feel in his entire life. Yet, the path forwards remained clearer still the further he walked. He might not be the strongest sorcerer there is, in fact he may never reach those heights, but that was all acceptable to the vessel of the strongest. Don't move. After hearing his comrade's words, he smiled because he knew as long as he and his friends live out long and happy lives, before dying proper deaths, then nothing else truly mattered. Of that, Itadori Yuji was certain. Following that realization of his will, the heavens responded to his will as sparks of black flowed throughout his arm. He threw the haymaker forwards with purpose as Saizum stood there powerless to evade his assault. Black flash! The space between his fist and the curse's side was distorted and flashed obsidian before an explosion of black lightning shattered a hole into the curse's armored exoskeleton and sent it stumbling backwards in pain, barely stopping himself by manipulating the earth to be an anchor. Subarashi, my brother, your talent is really something out of this world. Todo praised. The feeling of pride he held could be seen from a mile away. This is my cursed energy, right? Yuji asked himself. He felt speechless. It was as if he was having an out-of-body experience due to the influx of knowledge flowing into his senses. You have got to taste a sample of your cursed energy. Yuji turned to face his best friend and listened to his words with immense care, not wanting to miss a single word. Until now, it's like you've been putting ingredients you weren't familiar with into a pot and cooking haphazardly. But now? With a black flash, you've gained an ingredient as a chef. Or in this case as a jujutsu sorcerer, you are now on a different level than you were 3 seconds ago. The scared man explained, bringing his hands together and intertwining them to illustrate his point. Congratulations, brother! You will be strong. They both turned together at the sound of annoyed grunting. They watched as Saizum's armor regenerated in under a second. However, Todo spotted the curse's inner body and found it to be wanting compared to the durable exoskeleton it had on the outside. Look there, brother, it's regenerated its armor, but its output has definitely dropped following that attack. If we can break its armor and land a hit on the inner body, the fight is over. Todo declared, drawing his right arm up into a pose which his best friend copied. So then, shall we get cooking? You two are dumb as hell. But you did buy us enough time for my plan and revealed info on the curse while dealing good damage, so I guess it's fine. Nabara called out. In her hand were dozens of nails spinning around in a vortex of wind and cursed energy. Get ready, I don't think it's too happy with us after that black flash it ate. Inumaki nodded along before drinking a bit of throat medication, restoring his strain technique back into a usable state and getting ready to help his comrades once again in the battle. Fine then, humans, perhaps I was taking this too lightly. It is time for me to go all out, as it were. Saizum stated, his cursed energy fired up as the ground beneath them shook in response to his call. The true battle begins now. Pillars of rock and stone erupted from the ground and rushed towards them with intent to crush and impale his enemies. Yuji and Todo decided to take the direct approach and jump over the pillars and run across them to close the distance. My cursed technique is called Boogie Woogie. I can swap places with anyone in my vicinity that I want, and clapping my hands is the trigger. Todo declared as he clapped his hands a few times, swapping him and Yuji around to demonstrate his powers. TCH, this human is using a binding bow of revealing your own hand to explain his technique to Sukuna's vessel and to empower it at the same time. How troublesome. But nothing I can't handle. They won't be able to get past my exoskeleton again. Saizum deduced, before going on the offensive again. Saizum willed the pillars they ran upon to close up and fall behind them, collapsing against itself as if trying to crush them from behind. Even the sides of the pillars started closing down on them. The disaster curse then raised its gargantuan hand and aimed it towards the two corralled sorcerers. Its cursed energy burned as it fired off countless shards of rock, each sharp enough to rip straight through steel with brutal efficiency. Although Saizum expected them to pause at his move or try to dodge since it was a guaranteed death, but was taken aback when they didn't even slow down their approach. Instead they both grinned, causing him to panic. What? Why are they happy? What is their plan? Saizum muttered to himself but was cut off by a sudden scream. Inverse! To his shock, all of his shards inverted upon their trajectory and shot back at himself. He moved his arms to cover his body and grimaced as dozens of his own razor-sharp projectiles riddled his armored form. I forgot about the other two. They played me. He shouted out in rage, drawing a malicious laugh from a feminine voice. Ha ha! It's your fault for forgetting about the most important player on the field, Rockface. Kujisaki called out, intentionally trying to set him off again as the vortex of nails, cursed energy, and wind in her hand had just reached a critical mass of power. I said it, Saizum, you bitch! The disaster curse screamed out, waving a hand to shoot a tidal wave of earth towards Yuji and Todo to slow them down and turn to kill the one who mocked the name given to him by his elder sister. Tell that to someone who cares. She retorted before willing the vortex in her hands to move ahead of her and swinging her hammer at it with all her strength. Improvised combined maximum technique, whirling nail storm. With a deafening crackle, dozens of nails shot forwards the disaster curse and slammed into his exoskeleton, each one overflowing with cursed energy as they each caused a crack to form on his armor. But this wouldn't be a combined maximum technique if it stopped there. Inumaki, now! Spiral! The deflected nails converged back together and spiraled in on themselves. They formed a vortex of wind and steel that surrounded him. The nails then shot back and forth, slamming into and off of his exoskeleton, causing cracks to be spread throughout his entire body. Nobara stood back and laughed maniacally. She waved her fingers around like an orchestra conductor as the nails followed her will and completely overwhelmed the curse with piercing projectiles from all directions. And just when it couldn't have gotten worse for Saizum, it got even worse. Clap! Saizum looked around in the midst of his assault, only to find one of the nails around him to be replaced with Itadori Yuji. The vessel's eyes were covered by shadows. He had an arm pulled back and covered by his other with black sparks already flowing down his arm. Damn it, dash! Black flash! The already weakened exoskeleton of the disaster curse shattered apart under the force of Yuji's impact. Clap! He can swap with the nails too, dash! Black flash! Another shower of shards flew around as the armor protecting Saizum's chest broke apart in an instant. Clap! He didn't switch, dash! Black flash! A roundhouse kick slammed into Saizum's neck, the force shattering his carapace apart and bringing him down to his knees. The armor that once stood invincible was falling apart at the seams due to the continued assault from nails and fists. Oh, I can't keep up. They all keep swapping places, not just the vessel but the nails too. Any attack I throw is instantly neutralized or avoided by them due to their combined techniques. I can't even fight back. Saizum cried out in utter agony as the man chosen by the sparks of black made his claim once more. The curse tried to move to defend itself, but the pain was too much and his body was failing him, leaving him completely open to what was coming next. A right hook. Black flash. At this rate, dash. A left hook. Black flash. At this rate, dash. Clap. A stomp at the head. Black flash. At this rate, dash. Clap. An uppercut in the gut. I'm going to die. Black flash. Yuji Itadori's fist dug deep into the curse's abdomen with an explosion of obsidian lightning. Saizum's mouth was agape with agony. The force of the final black flash then reverberated through him once more as his entire exoskeleton was shattered. Purplish blood burst out of the curse's maw, before the delayed force of the vessel's punch followed through and created a shockwave emanating from his fist which sent the disaster curse flying backwards before falling onto the ground, beaten and battered completely. The four sorcerers stood there for a moment, waiting for the curse to get up but relaxed after it didn't move for a minute. They all sighed a collective sigh of relief as the battle ended quicker than they imagined. Victory was theirs. Phew, looks like it's over. Yuji sighed out, taking a moment to rest and bask in the afterglow of the sparks of black that flowed through him. That was magnificent, my brother, you indeed cooked. After this battle, you have become a culinary master beyond what your past self could have even imagined. Todo declared with prideful joy. Nothing made him happier than when he watched his brother flourish as a Jujutsu sorcerer. You couldn't have finished him off so easily without my help. You should be thanking me instead for saving your lives. Nobara scoffed with her trademark arrogance, although she was also proud of her classmate for hitting 8 consecutive black flashes. Salmon, tuna mayo. Inumaki said, pulling out some throat medicine and drinking it whole to restore his technique to its full. Exactly, Inumaki, without us they'd be done for. There's no way they would have been able to take down that Saizum dude. She declared, placing a hand at her hip as she did so. Immediately, everyone turned to look at her with alarmed expressions. To this she paused with her smile seeming somewhat strained. Eh? Well, it's not like I jinxed it, Yuji said it first. Nobara insisted, trying to defend herself from the inevitable. The ground beneath them shook with a promise of limitless violence, causing everyone to stare at her even harder. But he said it first dash. She tried to deflect the blame while flapping her arms up and down but was stopped by a familiar voice sounding out once more. Don't. They all collectively turned to face where the voice came from and watched as Saizum pulled himself up to his knees. Although his entire body seemed to be falling apart, it was being pulled back together just as quickly. Don't you underestimate me. Saizum shouted. The earth beneath him shifted and morphed before flowing into his body and replacing his broken carapace. I could even give Uncle Jogo a run for his money, so don't you puny humans think just this is enough to kill me? He screamed in indignation. He was correct in his boasting, as he could indeed fight the disaster-cursed Jogo into a standstill due to his type advantage, superior defense, and regeneration along with his special carapace armor. Although the cursed Jogo was still currently the strongest disaster-class curse alive as of this moment, as his firepower, speed, and cursed energy outclassed the rest something fierce. The ground beneath them shook as instead of simply attacking, it arose and closed on them, leaving them unable to run away from his next move. Nobara looked around frantically for a moment before she found a large shard of Saizum's armor that broke apart during Yuji's assault. She ran up to it and placed a voodoo doll on it before nailing down with her hammer. Resonance. Yet despite her efforts, it was all for naught as he wasn't affected by her attack, causing her to shout towards her comrades in frustration. His armor isn't part of his body. It must be purely made of the earth he absorbs then reinforces. I can't hurt him with resonance. Whatever he does now, he must still be severely damaged. One more solid hit is all we'd need to end him for real this time. Todo shouted out as he sprinted forwards with all his might, followed closely by Yuji, who responded with a short "got it." Aoi Todo's deduction was once again correct. The 8 consecutive black flashes that were landed by Itadori Yuji had brought Saizum to his absolute limits. One more hit would be all that was necessary to kill him as he was now. But a special grade disaster class curse was a special grade for a reason. And nothing is more dangerous than putting a wounded animal against the wall. Domain expansion, cradle of cataclysm. Shit! They all screamed in unison as a domain barrier swallowed them all whole. It all faded to black for a moment before light returned to their eyes. They all gaped in horror as they took in the view of the domain expansion. The domain is a desolate wasteland, with the ground constantly trembling and deep fissures splitting the earth. The sky is an ominous swirl of dark clouds, lit by a faint red glow. Monstrous, skyscraper-sized earthworms burst from the ground, their massive, segmented bodies tearing through the landscape with relentless ferocity. Their gaping maws, filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth, built to devour everything in sight, leaving behind only lifeless craters. Each one of the Shikigami held enough power and cursed energy reserves to be considered a special grade curse on their own right. The cursed energy within this domain amplified the terror of natural disasters, turning the very ground into a weapon. The earth itself seemed to be alive, shifting and quaking as if trying to swallow all who entered. Those trapped within will be relentlessly pursued by the gargantuan earthworms, with no hope of escape. Within this domain, survival was impossible, only the crushing power of the earth remains. You will all die for this humiliation, none shall survive the onslaught of my Shikigami brethren. Saizum announced before the roars of gargantuan monstrosities followed. Within his domain the ground surged towards him even faster as his entire exoskeleton was completely restored in under a second. Welp, I guess we're cooked, guys. Not really much we can do against that. Yuji said, not really seeing a way out of this domain. No shit, Sherlock, the best thing we could do now is survive until Megumi, Moki, or Gojo-sensei come here to save our asses. Nobara agreed, pulling out her Naginata in preparation for having to protect herself. Don't worry, brother, we can handle this. Todo declared, having full confidence that everything will turn out just fine. Just then, right as the Shikigami began moving towards them to devour them whole with tremors shaking the ground beneath them. A loud shattering sound reverberated throughout the domain, causing everyone to look upwards towards its source. Man, I love plot armor. The students all felt joy as they all instantly cheered up at the man they saw. He had white hair and was taking off his sunglasses with one hand while pointing another at the disaster curse with his other. Gojo-sensei! Yuji shouted cheerfully. He was never so happy to see his teacher as he was now. Esotoru Gojo! Saizum screamed, fear gripping his heart immediately when he saw who it was that invaded his domain. How dare you curses try to hurt my students on my watch? Gojo asked with disdain, before channeling his cursed technique. A red singularity appeared on his left and a blue one was summoned on his right. They collided together within his hand before he flicked the resulting imaginary mass towards the curse that threatened his beloved students. Hollow purple. Saizum tried to block the attack, but it was in vain, as even when placed all of his Shikigami in the way, and even threw all of his powers into creating a mountain between him and the attack, it was all for naught. The special grade disaster curse couldn't even scream in agony for more than a second, as it was completely and utterly erased from existence. The domain around them fell apart right after, returning them all into the real world as they watched the hollow purple continue flying forwards and obliterating everything in its path before fading away a few seconds later. Phew, thanks Gojo-sensei. Yuji called out, grateful to have been saved in time. No worries, Yuji. I would never let you get hurt. The white-haired man affirmed as he walked up to him and ruffled his hair. Wait, if you're here, then where's Megumi? Nobara asked, wanting to know where the idiot was since he promised to help them right after he and Moki finished up with their own curse. But before he could answer, boom! They all felt a shockwave reverberate throughout the entire area before a blinding flash of light appeared, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. Nobara and Inumaki were even thrown off their feet and onto the ground from the sudden force. When they all turned and were able to see what caused that shockwave, they all gaped as they saw a giant mushroom cloud disperse into the heavens. A crater was formed on the ground from the explosion, with cracks flowing through the ground, reaching even to where they were, with fire even crawling through the cracks in the earth, lighting them up with a bright orange. Flames covered the entire area to their right, with their heat reaching even to where they stood. It was as if the very sun had touched down on the surface for a moment. I think I can make a wild guess as to where he is, Gojo said after a small pause, feeling a mixture of surprise and worry at the sight of such a huge explosion. Oh, shut up, let's just go see what happened. 10 minutes prior. Moki ran ahead towards where Hanami landed, followed closely by Megumi. When they arrived, they watched as Hanami stood back up. She dusted herself off passively and awaited their approach. Although the force of their sudden attack had pushed her away, she didn't seem to be all that injured, as all their combined attack did was create indents on her arms, which was healed immediately. Looks like her already annoying durability was raised to astronomical levels. This'll need more force than previously expected. Megumi deduced. He reached into his soul and grasped upon the strings of power within him to activate his most useful incarnation to date. Incarnation, tranquil deer. He muttered under his breath as rings formed in his crimson eyes. He felt the now familiar sense of reverse cursed technique be reformed into his soul. Why must you children struggle so? This must be done. The world can't survive with humanity as the apex. It needs culling. This isn't from malice. It's from compassion. Hanami questioned in her paradoxical tongue. To her, it wasn't a matter of who lived, but a matter of the world's survival and growth. That's not something you curses can decide for yourselves. This world isn't yours to conquer. Moki replied, not caring for the curse's word since it didn't mean anything to her. Don't bother yourself with answering the questions of a curse, Moki. They're all insane, even if they can talk. Megumi asserted, walking a few feet forwards before channeling his positive energy into Koge and cursed energy into his Dark Moon Greatsword. It seems that words can't sway the two of you. Hanami sighed out. Nature responded to her plight as it bent under her will. An almost uncountable amount of roots emerged from the ground. Each had a razor-sharp edge ready to run them both straight through. Then perhaps violence will. Try me, you overgrown weed. It's about time for you to get some pruning. Megumi said, before activating both of his cursed weapons abilities. In Megumi's hand, Koge burned with a fiery glow. The twisted, spiral blade radiates red and orange, with a white-hot tip. Faint wisps of smoke drift from it, adding to its intense heat. The dark, rugged crossguard contrasts against the bright flames. And in his other hand, the dark moon greatsword glimmered with a mystical blue light. The blade radiated a cold, ethereal glow, sparkling like the night sky full of stars. Its edges shimmer with frosty energy, leaving a faint trail of icy mist as Megumi moves. Megumi held Koge high in his left hand, the dark blade angled upward as flames overcame its form, casting a warm, flickering light across the scene. In his right hand, he gripped the dark moon greatsword, its icy blade angled downward. The greatsword emanated a frosty aura, chilling the air around it and causing snowflakes to float down from it. The two sorcerers shot forwards to close the distance between them and the curse. Megumi charged up his dark moon greatsword before swinging it back and forth towards Hanami. With each swing a slash of pure cursed frost flew towards the curse, each attack capable of rending apart humans and curses alike with ease. The disaster curse used her cursed technique disaster plants to manipulate thick roots to burst out of the ground and block all frost arcs with only some trouble, before she grew the roots even further to flood towards them. They both decided to meet the flood of plant growth head-on as they slammed into the plants as a chainsaw would to the trunk of a tree. Moki smashed through the flood of wood with brute force as her sharp and playful cloud shredded through it all as if it was moving through wet tissue paper. Megumi on the other hand used Koge as his main tool to get through the stream of plants, its blazing dark blade turning everything it touched to ashes with but the merest brush. Although they were making headway in approaching the curse, the plant seemed to be never-ending and also growing stronger the closer they reached, so they chose to jump on top of the oncoming tide and ride the wave of roots as a direct path to their enemy. However, this was exactly her plan as she proceeded to enclose around them with roots on both of their sides before summoning a field of flowers to sprout on top of her roots. The flowers then released a puff of cursed pheromones which entered their bodies before they could hope to react. This move took both of them off guard, Megumi most of all as she had never used this application of her abilities before from what he remembered. Her attack had an immediate effect as both sorcerers were afflicted by her ability's effect, causing them both to pause and lose all will to fight, which left them wide open for her follow-up attack when the roots around them formed spiked ends and shot towards them with intent to kill. Unfortunately for the disaster curse, Moki had recovered from the pacifying effects of her ability much faster than Megumi would have due to the effect of her heavenly restriction, which allowed her body to filter out and overcome the effect of the flowers much faster than even Satoru Gojo would have. Moki grabbed Megumi by his shoulder and jumped upwards, side-swiping away an encroaching branch with her playful cloud in one hand as she did so. "I got you!" she called out as she jumped away with the taller man in tow. He snapped out of it a second later right as she put him back down on the ground. "Shit, that was close. Thanks for the save, Moki." Megumi thanked, grateful for the save but inwardly beating himself for the screw-up. "Damn it all me. If Moki wasn't there, I would have gotten myself injured heavily and been forced to expend a lot of energy just to survive. I can't rely on previous knowledge anymore. These damned curses could all have brand new enhanced abilities for all I know. Don't mention it, now get your head in the game and let's kill this bitch." Moki reassured, taking a moment to roll her shoulders in order to loosen them up. "Yeah, let's." Megumi nodded as both his cursed weapons fired up with their opposing elements once more. They charged forwards with renewed vigor as their opponent responded in kind. Roots emerged from the ground and flooded towards them. Moki and Megumi both jumped on top of the branches once more. This time they were ready for any moves. Megumi in particular was taking special care to avoid getting caught off guard by any sudden growths by allowing his flaming blade to run rampant and burn to ashes everything in his path. However, this time it wasn't any brand new abilities that took him off guard, it was their opponent's sudden choice to speak up. "My cursed technique is called a disaster plants. It allows me to manipulate cursed plants to my will and morph them into any shape I desire." Hanami started, catching both her opponents off guard as the roots beneath them began to writhe and distort faster and more severely. "The ability you are currently facing is called a disaster roots. there is no limit to how many roots I can form. However, their power and speed is always inversely proportional to the length and number of roots I form. The plants beneath them shot forwards with spiked ends to run them through, their power being beyond anything the curse had exhibited in this fight. Megumi and Moki doubled their efforts at getting to the curse. With each step they took, they skillfully avoided being speared and impaled. They were even occasionally shot with cursed buds that tried to latch onto their bodies but were parried away or avoided. They were only able to keep up with the speed and power of the roots thanks to their heavily enhanced bodies. As if Todo and Yuji had fought the disaster curse alone as they did before, they would have been slaughtered without a doubt. What the hell is this? When did binding vows become the new thing that everybody used? What is this, binding vow Kaisen? Megumi called out with annoyance in his mind as he swung his flaming greatsword to destroy a root that was about to impale them from the side. The two of them kept climbing the seemingly insurmountable mountain of growing plants. They then felt a tremor shake through the ground beneath them, which made them realize that they were being lured upwards into the air by being forced to climb towards the curse. Hanami made a noise that sounded suspiciously like a small chuckle before all of the roots beneath them all spontaneously and simultaneously disintegrated into nothingness, leaving them both without a floor to stand on, while Hanami stayed in the air as she stood atop a wooden ball made from her cursed technique. "It's time to die, children," Hanami declared, summoning 6 floating wooden balls which sprouted 3 spikes each that shot towards their heads. However, it was time for the disaster curse to be taken off guard, as her 2 opponents that should have been left falling, flailing, and helpless both disappeared from their locations in the time that it took her to summon her wooden balls. "What? Where'd they go?" Hanami screamed as panic and surprise instantly gripped her heart when both her opponents disappeared from view, doubly so when she heard an almost smug feminine voice behind her. "Behind you, flower hippie." Hanami was barely able to turn their head before it was smashed into by Moki's playful cloud right at her head. The user of the weapon was currently stepping upon the air itself as if it was the ground. Moki proceeded to strain her legs with all her strength and pushed against the air itself, causing a small wave of condensed air to disperse and send her flying above the curse. The disaster curse was then surprised by a searing pain shooting through their abdomen. Hanami looked down towards the pain and saw Koge spearing right through her. She was barely even able to take a second to breathe before a surge of flames burst out from the blade. Megumi flapped his obsidian wings from his hastily activated new incarnation to grant himself more airtime before using the gained leverage to spike his Dark Moon greatsword downwards into Hanami's body through her flower shoulder and shredding into the rest of the curse's inner body right as frost seeped from the icy blade and into the curse's body. And then, sparing no time to allow Hanami even the slightest chance to breathe, Moki spun around in the air to gather momentum before slamming her playful cloud into the curse's head. The impact between the staff and the disaster curse's head had caused a small sonic boom to reverberate before she was shot down from the skies and into the ground in a massive cloud of dust and rubble. During the process of being shot down from the skies, Hanami's body was gutted and ripped open due to the presence of Megumi's twin blades still being inside of her. Moki and Megumi looked down at the cloud of dust as they were descending to meet their opponent, landing on the fractured ground shortly afterwards. "Why think it's dead?" Moki asked, scanning the area with her eyes and looking for any sign that the curse might still be alive following their combined attack. Probably not. I'd keep my guard up, who knows what other bullshit abilities it's got under its sleeve. Megumi asserted. He faintly remembered Hanami having some kind of intrinsic ability to blend in with flora somehow and move through them. "I know of a good way to check." He then called out a moment later, his cursed energy firing up once more as he activated a brand new incarnation, causing his crimson eyes to shift into that of brilliant azure flames. Incarnation, Funeral Tiger. Megumi felt his cursed energy output rise immensely as soon as he activated the incarnation, and along with that, he could tell that outputting cursed energy as blasts like he trained and researched how to would now be as simple as breathing in and out. He raised a hand and willed his cursed energy to flow towards it. Within less than a second, an azure flame-like orb of cursed energy coalesced in his hand. Megumi grinned as he had finally solved the path towards a new potential avenue for growth before he crushed the orb in his hand and looked up to scan the area, as that was the actual reason he had used the incarnation to begin with. With his new eyes, Megumi Fushiguro could now see and absorb the remnant remains of any being that died within his vicinity, much like how his Shikigami could. And if he does so, then the cursed energy of whatever he devours could potentially be an indefinite addition to his total reserves of cursed energy. I don't see any remnants. She must still be alive, hiding somewhere nearby, I presume. That, or she's just so scared she ran away so that she wouldn't die. Just then, as they were about to continue chatting, the two of them felt a subtle shake in the forest. Turning to face it, they saw something they couldn't have expected. Megumi in particular was getting really annoyed at the oncoming developments. So on top of all your already ridiculous and varied abilities that seem to have no end, you can just go around and turn regular trees into your Shikigami. Ones that can even match regular special grade curses to boot. Indeed, Hanami had created her very own Shikigami by instilling her own cursed energy into them and twisting the once mighty oaks into 6 horrifying abominations of nature. They are called Ents, child, manifestations of nature's disdain for you filthy humans. Hanami stated, holding her right arm with her left and forcing her shoulder to connect together again with the rest of her body as it was taking longer to heal than usual thanks to the effect of Kogi's flames. The 6 Ents loomed behind Hanami like twisted abominations, their bark-covered bodies gnarled and knotted. Thick limbs extended into claw-like branches, and their faces, carved into the wood, bore deep-set eyes glowing with eerie green light. Their mouths were dark, jagged openings with splintered wooden teeth. How the hell did you even have enough cursed energy to make them? You're barely pulling yourself together as you are now. Moki asked, somewhat confused about the logistics behind how it even worked. Under the suggestion of a certain sorcerer, I prepared for the eventuality of my life being threatened and created them with the condition of only awakening once my life was under duress, as it were. Hanami explained, knowingly twisting her words in order to reveal enough to incur another binding vow of revealing your own hand. Hanami had then reached down with her flowered arm and started absorbing the life energy of the nearby flora into it, powering up the cursed bud with enough energy to turn even grade 1 sorcerers such as Nanami to ashes in an instant. Her explanation had caused veins to start bulging upon Megumi's forehead from the implication that not only had Kenjaku taught the disaster curses about how to abuse binding vows, but he was also instilling in them the concept of playing dirty, teamwork and planning ahead. Along with that, there was the matter of her and possibly the rest of the disaster curses learning to adapt and gain new facets to their cursed techniques. All of this led to him releasing his frustrations in one sentence that summarized his feelings about the situation. Look, I know this sounds filthy rich coming from me, but your powers are bullshit. Having made his grievances known, Megumi calmed back down and looked at things from an objective standpoint. He came to the conclusion that continuing to fight Hanami as they are now could prove risky, as it might take them too long to kill her while she's being protected by her Shikigami. Moki, can you handle the 6 Shikigami while I kill Hanami alone? He asked, whispering in a very low tone, knowing that she would hear him. I dunno, can you kill her in the 2 minutes it'll take for me to kill them? She answered, her confidence was evident in her tone of voice. Well duh. Then you have your answer. Megumi nodded to his partner and disappeared from his place, reappearing before Hanami right as she finished draining the forest of energy. The special grade sorcerer brought his hands together as soon as he arrived in front of the disaster curse, and with burning cursed energy he started chanting. Hanami noticed what he was doing and immediately made her own hand sign and started chanting as well. Domain expansion, Chimera Shadow Garden. Domain expansion, Ceremonial Sea of Light. 2 separate domain barriers formed immediately and started closing around them, beginning to trap them within their clashing domains. The Ents tried to enter the domain barriers in order to support their master, but were stopped by the veritable bulldozer that was Moki Zenin. She shredded through the first Shikigami's body in an instant, stopping them from interfering. The domain barriers finished forming and collided against each other right as the insides of each domain formed behind the forms of each fighter. Hanami's domain expansion is a vibrant, surreal field of colorful flowers, with petals in every shade imaginable blanketing the ground. Tall, ethereal trees with twisted trunks and shimmering silver leaves rise in the distance. Above, the sky is a gradient of blues, with wispy clouds swirling gently, enhancing the dreamlike atmosphere. It stood in stark contrast to Megumi's domain. The shadows within his soul flooded outwards as if trying to devour everything in sight. They created an ocean of never-ending void, and in the very center of the domain stood its anchor, a colossal spinal column from which sprouted countless branches born of bone and void, a fruit of which was formed at the end of each branch. Then, curiously, without prompting, 10 of those countless fruits shook in their place and fell down from their places into the infinite ocean of shadows without any ceremony. The domain clash between the two of the domains began right afterwards, and at first the domains seemed rather equal as neither pushed past each other. However, 3 seconds following the start of the domain clash, the abyss formed of Megumi's shadow started devouring the fantastical field of flowers that was born of Hanami's innate domain. Damn it! I'm going to lose the clash. I can't afford to take his sure hit no matter what it is. I can't rely on my own sure hit. I need to fire the blast and make him lose some concentration, Hanami said, speaking outwards in her panic to try and shift the tides of the domain clash into her favor. However, what she didn't expect was for her words to cause her opponent to burst out in hysterical laughter. Ha ha ha! How bold of you to assume that my sure hit hasn't already landed. What dash? Splurt Hanami looked down at her chest only to find a claw of what must have been an amalgamation spearing her straight through her abdomen. But we were in a domain C clash, how did you land a sure hit? And then another amalgamation grabbed onto her body, this time its limb was pink and orange. Correction, we are currently in a domain clash. You were a second too late in casting your domain. And then another, and another, and another. Or rather, more accurately, I'm just that much better at using domains than you that I was able to expand my domain and apply its sure hit before you could even form your own domain barrier. Soon enough, Hanami's entire body was grappled and pierced by abominations of nature. Her domain had already crumbled apart behind her, leaving her behind to be devoured by the endless abyss of Fushiguro Megumi's Uchimura Shadow Garden. This is the sure hit of my domain expansion. Anyone struck by it is left completely helpless, as I can insert any kind Shikigami, merger or otherwise, into their own shadows. Of course, the one struck by this sure hit will have no idea of the Shikigami's existence, as they will be 100% hidden from any cursed energy detection. Megumi explained, a malicious grin beginning to cover his face as he knew that his opponent was well and truly screwed. I can make any number of copies of a singular Shikigami, and use any number of them in a merger as I'd like. The only limitation is that there can only be a maximum of 10 separate entities implanted inside the shadows of other beings. He continued, not caring in the slightest as his opponent was starting to make headway in releasing herself from his amalgamation's grasp. And here's the kicker, any Shikigami I implant within the shadows of whoever is hit by my sure hit stay summoned indefinitely even after the domain has ended. He laughed out, finding the hilarity in how ridiculous the effects of the domain were. And of course he still retains his ability to create as many Shikigami as he wishes while the domain is active, as long as they aren't being inserted into an enemy's shadow. Along with that, he can still move freely and teleport throughout the domain as he wishes. The only limitation to this was his own ability to keep them summoned without draining too much cursed energy, as they would be dismissed if he ever ran out or was knocked unconscious. Theoretically, as long as he could handle the cursed energy drain of doing so, he could summon 10 Mahoriga clones and place them in a target's shadow indefinitely, and there would be no way for the target to ever know for sure. Granted, I had to trade away my ability to move other people around in my domain, as well as foregoing my ability to drown others inside my sea of shadows, not that it mattered, as the truly strong wouldn't even be affected by it in the slightest. Megumi considered, taking a moment to rub his chin in thought. He snapped out of his introspection a few moments later and looked back towards the disaster curse, finding her to have almost broken out of the Shikigami's grasp due to his inattention. She had gotten enough time to recover her cursed technique and used it to escape the grasp of the Shikigami, jumping away. She expected to be attacked or hit by another wave of Shikigami, but was taken by surprise when all the amalgamation simply stared at her in waiting. Oh, right. Still need to kill you. Well, I have been meaning to try out another prospective maximum technique, so how about it, HM? I'll release you from my domain and you use your strongest move. He offered casually, letting the subtle threat of simply annihilating her where she stood hang in the air should she refuse. Megumi's Zenin grin could be subtly seen thanks to his still burning azure irises from his funeral tiger incarnation. He stood tall as he was framed by the blinding light reaching from the very top of his domain that promised false hope of survival. Let's have a contest of firepower, no dodging between either side. And if you somehow manage to survive, I'll let you go. This offer caused Hanami to take pause, thinking it through, and she realized that it was her only possible chance of survival at this point. Very well, Fushiguro Megumi, I accept your challenge. Hanami said, accepting his offer as she didn't have any other choice considering the ease at which her opponent had brought her to her knees a few seconds prior. Megumi's domain barrier faded away, returning them both to the ground where they stood. It was now a broken shadow of its former self, showing the scars of a brutal battle. Looking up at the sky, he noticed that the curtain had faded, which means that Satoru had likely already gone to save the others. Oh? I thought you would have finished up with her by now after the domain clash. What happened? Moki asked. She was currently sitting upon the destroyed remains of the Sixth Sense with naught but a scratch on her body. Don't worry about it. I just want to test something, so I'm gonna let it use its strongest attack while I test out a new maximum technique I've been workshopping in my head. Megumi answered, allowing Hanami to absorb more energy from the nature around them. So a junk measuring contest. Well, if you have to put it like that, sure. Megumi shrugged before turning to the disaster curse. I'll be watching from a bit further away in case your dumbassery catches up to you and you need to be bailed out. Have fun! Moki called out as she walked away and jumped up to the top of a nearby cliffside with a single bound. Who does she think I am, Satoru? He shook his head while walking towards the disaster curse, stopping a few feet away. With the heavens above as my witness, I vow to never channel these flames of mine through incarnation to hurt another soul unless they are to be used in this one following maximum technique and preceded by the following chants. And in exchange they are forever thereafter enhanced leagues and bounds beyond their natural maximum potential. After completing his declaration of his binding vow, Megumi brought his hands up before activating his Max Elephant incarnation, along with his already activated incarnations of Tranquil Deer and Funeral Tiger. He slammed both his palms together with great force as golden sparks of electricity started flowing from his body into the palm of his hand. He then started chanting to enhance his attack even further and match the requirements of the vow. Ancestors' Horns. Hanami continued gathering up energy from the environment around her, so much so that everything within a 50-meter radius had turned dark and grey. The flower on top of her shoulder had gathered enough energy that it would blind anyone that dared stare into its singularity of energy. Galahar Horn Cry. Megumi pulled his hands apart, static electricity connecting both his palms together as a crimson orb of flames coalesced in between his palm. More and more flames were drawn out of his hands and compressed further and further. Phoenix Embers. Hanami had finished her charge-up time and had absorbed all of the possible energy within the entirety of nearby forest, turning it all into a monotonous wasteland where nothing would grow for generations. Megumi had also completed his chanting. Within the palms of his hands was what could only be described as a crimson miniature sun, and within its center was a single spark of azure. It flowed from and back like a semi-liquid within his hands as it barely held its shape together due to the effect of the golden sparks. Born of crimson flames, guided by golden lightning and powered by azure soul. Hanami just fired her beam, without not waiting for any words or signs to start, a ginormous beam of pure solar energy flying towards Megumi Fushiguro with enough power behind it to obliterate entire city blocks without any issue. To this, all the special grade sorcerer did was grin slightly as he thought of the name he had chosen for this ability, a play on the name of another similar ability. Megumi then unclasped his hands from around the orb of flames and announced his attack's name to the heavens. Maximum Technique, Flashfire Grill. For a moment the tiny unstable orb of crimson flames and golden lightning seemed to be overshadowed by the sheer size of the beam of energy it was faced with. And then? Then there was light. Boom! All one could hear was a high-pitched ringing in your ears as it was simply impossible to see what was before you from the sheer amount of light produced. not even the wielder of the heavenly restriction was capable of keeping her eyes open to witness the explosion of apocalyptic proportions. INGGGGG tilde the sounds of ringing echoed in the ears of all present and still breathing, as the shockwave and sound created by the explosion would have shattered the eardrums of any human alive. After a minute, the dust and ashes settled, allowing one to view the aftermath of the explosion as it truly was, a scene of utter devastation. A massive crater, charred and smoking, dominated the landscape, its edges jagged and uneven from the force of the blast. The ground surrounding it was fractured with deep cracks radiating outward, each one glowing with molten orange flames that flickered and hissed like a living being. The air was thick with the scent of scorched earth and the lingering heat of the crimson fire and golden electricity that had torn through the area. Golden sparks of electricity ran along the ground, the residuals of their power being too strong to simply fade away this quickly. Similarly, almost ethereal-like patches of azure flames were scattered around the crater, slowly burning away with the eternal power of remnant soul. And within the epicenter of the crater was one small azure orb of flames, the last remnant of what used to be the special grade disaster curse Hanami. Quiet footsteps could be heard as from an ash cloud emerged Megumi Fushiguro. Though he had won their clash, he had not escaped completely unscathed. Despite, or rather because of the overwhelming power of his brand new maximum technique, he was not completely immune to the effects of its flames as they hard burned off his upper body's clothing and gave him first-degree burns covering his chest. However, the special-grade sorcerer couldn't bring himself to care less as he had just simply activated his borrowed reverse cursed technique and was mending together his body without even flinching from what must be agonizing burns. Not a bad outcome, all things considered. We'll definitely have to watch out for the backlash of the flames the next time I use it, he muttered under his breath. I'm also now pretty low on cursed energy reserves, so I should probably keep that in mind. Can't be a one-shot wonder after all. Although, should probably keep it as a last-case scenario. This amount of property damage would make Sukuna blush. Megumi chuckled to himself as he looked around at the marred battlefield. He doubted if the forest would ever recover from the amount of damage it endured. He had deactivated all his incarnations except Tranquil Deer to conserve energy as soon as the explosion settled down, and so he summoned Funeral Tiger by his side. The Shikigami understood the silent order when it was summoned and immediately called the remnants of Hanami to himself. As Megumi Fushiguro watched the azure flames on his divine tiger's back burn greater and greater, before firing up into a blazing inferno which threatened to blot out the sun, a giant grin covered his face from ear to ear. And then, he said but one word. Jackpot. 2 days after the Goodwill Invasion incident. 7 a.m. Tokyo Jujutsu Tech Baseball Court. Megumi leaned against the wall with his hands crossed. He had opted out of competing in the baseball match and instead was just watching his classmates have fun. He had more important matters to attend to, like keeping an eye on a specific duo out of the corner of his eye. Surprisingly, Moki had chosen to continue in the match but was told to put on weighted restraints to at the very least somewhat normalize the disparity in physical strength between both teams and even all the members of her own team. Moki brought her arms together and pulled them back, raising her leg as she did so as she got in a perfect baseball pitching pose. Following that, she moved her body forwards and stomped her foot at the ground, causing a small crater to form as she did so. She heaved her body forwards with all of her strength, and threw a baseball at her target with pinpoint accuracy, a sonic boom being left in the wake of her now lethal projectile. The baseball shot forwards with remarkable speed and accuracy towards its distracted target. The ball broke the sound barrier one more time during its flight, drawing the attention of everyone in the area except its target. Brother, please promise me this one thing. If I hit this home run, you'll pitch dash. Todo's heartfelt request was brutally cut off when his face was met by a baseball moving at Mach 3. His body turned with the force of the impact, the sounds of a great rupture reverberating throughout the air right afterwards. Todo's jaw was immediately dislocated, causing blood to spurt out his mouth as he was laid out on the ground. Todo! Yuji cried out, throwing himself towards the taller man and grabbing him as he fell down. Your jaw got broken, he said, grabbing onto his back and inspecting his injury. Beboda, you need to dash. Todo blurted, barely being able to string a sentence together or even speak normally. I need to do what, Todo? Do what? Itadori almost begged him to answer. It was almost a primal need for him to know what seemed to be his best friend's final wish. Nice pitch. Momo called out in appreciation for the strong throw, causing Miwa, who was standing beside her, to chuckle awkwardly. And it seemed like she wasn't the only one who found the throw to be a perfect throw, as many more of the students from either school called out as well just seconds later. Nice pitch. Nice pitch. Nice pitch. Nice pitch. Itadori Yuji watched as one by one, each of his classmates congratulated Moki on her throw, with even Megumi watching on in amusement and laughing at his brother's painful circumstances. Todo, you are seriously hated. The pink-haired teen muttered while looking at his friend's nigh-broken form, not understanding why he was disliked so much. Yuji heard faint footsteps approaching his location. Looking up towards, he saw Megumi approaching with his hands in his pockets. Oh. Megumi, can you please heal him? He doesn't deserve this pain, he asked, lifting the man upwards as if he was making an offering to the gods. Don't worry about it, Yuji, that's what I'm here for. He chuckled, summoning his tranquil deer by his side. The Shikigami formed from shadows within an instant, looking around for a moment before it leaned its head down and touched Todo's head with its antler. The soft glow of reversed cursed technique permeated through the air as positive energy flowed from the massive deer's antlers and into the broken sorcerer's head. The sounds of small fractures could be heard as Todo's jaw was forced back into place with a sickening crunch. The once weary and broken man shot up from his place with renewed vigor. Thanks, Fushigo bro. I knew you'd have my back. The scared man thanked as he was pulled up to his feet by Yuji, grateful for his good friend's aid in his time of need. Not a problem on my end, although I think she might have something to say about that. Megumi answered, gesturing to the right with his thumb. The two of them followed his line of sight and watched as Nobara threw Moki another baseball. The black-haired woman proceeded to lean backwards again and pitch the baseball towards Todo's face with even more force behind it than before. Oh, that's not good. Todo didn't manage to finish his sentence before he was thrown backwards once more as a sonic boom reached beside them. See, Todo! Yuji screamed in surprise, before running to where he was thrown and holding the scared man again. Nice pitch. Nice pitch. Nice pitch. Nice pitch. Nice pitch. Megumi laughed in amusement as the same situation occurred again for the second time in 1 minute. He looked towards Tranquil Deer for a moment and pointed towards the two best friends. Keep healing him up after every time he gets his shit rocked. This is too funny to let end just like that, he ordered before walking off to lay against a tree in its shade. He watched out of the corner of his eyes as Satoru walked past the duo of Principal Gakuganji and Principal Yaga, before the older man told Yaga something which prompted him to get up and walk off in the direction of the white-haired man. Grinning, he melded with the shadows around him and disappeared from view. He moved silently within the shadows as he quickly made his way towards the sitting older man. A moment later, he emerged from the shadows again as his grin was overcome with malicious intent. Megumi stepped over the small bench Gakuganji was sitting on and sat beside him, drawing a surprised gasp from the old man. Zennin Megumi? What are you ? The principal demanded, his complete and utter surprise being evident in his voice and demeanor. Shhhh. Give me a second. Megumi shushed, bringing a hand up into the pose of a curtain which drew even more surprise from the old man. Conceal within thine shadows, deeper than night. Shroud all that must remain unseen. Gakuganji watched as the curtain fell around them, turning to face the special grade sorcerer beside him with a great sense of foreboding. Most worrying of all was the grin on the black-haired man's face. It reminded him too much of another man who had brought him the same sense of fear about a decade prior. What's wrong? Seen a ghost, have you? The black-haired man asked, although he knew full well why he was so taken aback. What is the meaning of this? Your name is Yoshinobu Gakuganji and you're 76 years old. You're the 5th principal of the Kyoto Jujutsu Tech Municipal School, and although you aren't recognized as a sorcerer anymore, you still retain about the strength of a semi-grade 1 or a grade 2 sorcerer. Megumi stated, looking onwards towards his classmates as they continued their match of baseball. What are you dash? You don't actually live in the school, but you live in the Kinkakuji Buddhist temple nearby, and you usually get to the school at around 7 a.m. every day on the dot. He continued, that grin of malice not leaving his face for a moment even as the old man's body started being covered from head to toe in sweat. Your favorite food is actually tempura vegetables and your least favorite is horse meat of any kind. Your hobby is playing the guitar and you're looking for a drummer that can match your beat. Your musical inspiration is Jimi Hendrix and you own many of his albums which you keep proudly on display in your living room. To describe the sense of horror and disbelief that flowed through Yoshinobu Gakuganji as his whole life was laid bare would be an exercise in futility. He looked to undergo many emotions in the span of a few seconds. Countless questions flooded his mind, but he knew that only one would be necessary. What do you want? Good to see the message got across. You will be my eyes and ears with the inner council of Jujutsu HQ. Every little thing I want to know, every lie told, every secret buried, if those old farts you call elders so much as stub a toe I want to know it. Megumi commanded. It was already a done deal as far as he was concerned. And if I refuse? Gakuganji asked, although in his heart he knew what the answer would be. This is a specialized curtain of my own design. By foregoing everything else, the insides of this curtain are completely imperceptible to all those outside it. To those outside the curtain, it would look as if there was no one in here. He explained, watching in amusement as Todo was using Boogie Woogie to avoid another baseball thrown from Moki. So if I were to just reach forwards and snap your neck, I could just hide the body inside my shadow and walk off. No one would even know you disappeared. Megumi stated, his right arm moving like a snake as his hand wrapped around the back of the principal's neck and squeezed lightly. Cough cough, why you wouldn't dare kill me dash. Gakuganji coughed out, being barely able to breathe even from the light grip. To him it was as if a steel hydraulic press was clamped around his neck, ready to turn it into paste. Look around, old man. Do you see anyone that could stop me? Do you see anyone who would stop me? And let's not kid ourselves with your students, we both know none of them would have the balls to do anything. He continued, eyeing up the Kyoto students one by one. Let's take Kamo for example. I'm pretty sure I could ask that spineless halfwit to jump and he'd just ask how high. Megumi said, actively keeping his tone as low as possible and making threats to maximize his intimidation. I should probably let up on him though. Although his existence pisses me off, he didn't do anything wrong to me specifically. Do I need to apologize? Nah, I'll just get Rin to get him contact with his mom. That's enough of an apology for him. You're a monster? I know. Megumi took a moment to allow the man at his mercy to think, to let the reality of how helpless he was at the moment truly sink in. Watching on as his face slowly turned blue from the lack of oxygenated blood reaching his brain, all without blinking once. And besides, he continued on a minute later, removing his hand from the older man's neck as he did so to allow him to breathe easy again for his next question. Do you honestly think you have much of a choice here? Principal Gakuganji was silent for a moment, too busy greedily huffing air to try and catch his breath after being deprived of his ability to breathe for so long, before he eventually sighed with a mixture of frustration and resignation. No. Good, glad we're clear on that. Get on with it then, I have better things to do than sit around here with you. Megumi commanded. He left no room for negotiation or backing out. I vow to devote my whole being, body and soul to the one known as Megumi Zenin. His will is my command and I will be sure to never betray him knowingly or of my own will and accord. Gakuganji vowed, putting his head down as he did in a show of defeat. Perfect, now, for your first task. You will transfer Aoi Todo, Kasumi Miwa, and Arata Nita to my Tokyo Jiu-Jitsu Tech School. He ordered, raising a finger with each name to illustrate his point. B but dash. I dash. Very well. The principal stuttered at the outrageous request, yet despite how much it would inevitably irreparably damage his school's roster and established systems, he simply could not deny Fushiguro Megumi his demands. However, Megumi Fushiguro was not completely satisfied with the older man's tone. So he chose to show this by simply unfurling his hold over his cursed energy slightly, letting it seethe and wash over the old sorcerer's body. It will be done as soon as possible, Zen-in-sama. Gakugunji almost shot upwards into attention at the sudden pressure being placed upon him. That's better, Megumi said with a chuckle, lightly slapping the principal's back as he did so. He took no small amount of pleasure in the torment he was instilling into the older man, considering that he ordered for Yuji's death and has been a pain in his side for a long time. Deciding that he was about done wasting his time with him, Megumi stood up and straightened his shirt before taking a step forwards away from the bench. He turned his head slightly and looked at Gakugunji from the corner of his eye. Don't worry, my people will be in touch and make sure you know what to do and where to squeal. You all will learn to fall in line soon enough. It won't be too long now after all, before your world of sorcerers becomes my own Jujutsu society. The curtain covering the two of them faded away soon after, right as he walked off in the direction he saw Moki go to after the baseball game had been completed. He left behind a beaten and broken man whose whole body was covered in sweat as it sunk in how the world he had spent so long upholding would soon all crumble to dust under the iron will of a single man. Megumi made his way towards a nearby building. He could swear he saw Moki and Nobara enter it a few minutes earlier. I should call Rin. She said she already got the location of that weapon and sent me the address, but I need to check for the other thing I had her get. He wondered, walking past Todo, who was once again sprawled out on the ground in agony. Yuji held his bleeding form with a dramatic expression of complete and utter tragedy. Brother! Hang in there! Tranquil Deer huffed in annoyance as she came up to the two of them again, leaning her head down and touching the scared sorcerer with her antlers for what seemed like one too many times. Megumi slid open the door and walked into the inner hall of the gymnasium. Eventually he saw both Nobara and Moki standing a few feet away from each other, both with crimson faces and ruffled clothes. He stood there quietly, taking in their embarrassed faces as an amused grin covered his face. From where he stood, he could see that Moki had used her superior speed to move away from something or someone, especially considering the odd change in air pressure he felt when he had entered the room. What are you doing here, Megumi? Nobara asked while moving some of her hair to behind her right ear, trying to act unaffected and failing badly. I'm here to get Moki for a bit of a mission, but this is just hysterical. Nobara and Moki, sitting in a tree K.I.S.S. Megumi teased, raising a hand to cover his face as he did so, but was cut off by having to dodge a punch. The fist he dodged went on to pierce straight through a wall, causing it to crumble to rubble in an instant, although all that did was cause him to laugh even harder. Or Tilda, what's wrong, Moki? You going all thunder on me now? He continued on, dodging a clump of rubble right afterwards. You got a mission for me, you said? We'll get to that in a sec, for now. Dodge. Moki growled, blurring ahead with full intent to separate his head from the rest of his body. An hour later. Dunno why you're still so pissed, Moki. Megumi chuckled, his hands held together behind his head as they entered a derelict building in the edges of the Saitama prefecture. Shut the hell up before I decide you're not worthy of breathing again. Moki grumbled under her breath, walking ahead of him and obliterating the front door with a casual flick of her wrist. Freaking schlong blocker. PFFFT, you'll get over it in a bit. Especially when you see the little surprise I got ready for you in here. He explained, walking inside the building with her following him right after. What is this place anyways? Looks like the kind of place people get kidnapped to and gutted open to be harvested for their skin or something in a horror movie. The black-haired woman asked. She had a disgusted look on her face as she walked through the grimy remains of what used to be a meat shop. You're right on the money actually. This is the workshop of a curse user named Juzo Kumiya. We're here to get you to his masterpiece. Supposedly he created a special grade cursed blade, one even you could use to its fullest extent. Megumi revealed. With that revelation, he stepped through a plastic curtain and found what must be the remains of a human after being stripped of most of their flesh. As you can see, he ain't the kindest guy around. He's getting executed in Jujutsu HQ soon if my info is right too. The black-haired man raised a hand towards the violated remains before a roiling flame sparked out of his bare hands, without the need to channel an incarnation. This new mutation is useful, generation of both fire and water at the palms of my hands whenever I want to. Don't think they'll be useful in a fight against anyone that is strong by themselves, but hey, who am I to complain about a free boost? He watched as the skeleton was turned to ashes, a small mercy given to those that suffered without a chance to protect themselves. Megumi had evolved once more, this time with the essence of his Shikigami Max Elephant, granting him a large boost in physical strength and bone density. Along with that, he had gained the ability to output water and flames from his hands at will. Yeah, no kidding. Maki muttered, her disgust towards this building seeming more evident than before even as she felt a subtle shake in the ground. Let's not stop here, I think I can feel the cursed tool in there. You go get it, I'll deal with our hosts while you do so. Megumi pointed towards a door in the far corner of the room. You felt them too, huh? Alright, I'll go get it, be back in a sec. Maki walked into the room to look for the cursed blade that her comrade spoke of. The doors behind him were thrown open as several men with shabby clothing and messy dispositions burst into the room, immediately starting to shout orders in sync as they did so. Oi! Who the hell are you, bitch face? What are you doing in our brother's hideout? Who? The two of them shouted out in unison, spit flying from their mouths. Quiet! Your presence is revolting enough without you speaking out of line. The shadows around them coiled and bubbled over after Megumi spoke those cold words. His crimson eyes lit up the dark room around them as long, serpentine malformed shadows formed at his side. Orokai, kill them and leave one breathing. He ordered, and the shadows obeyed their master as large serpents made of pure shadows burst forwards towards their prey. The curse users tried to defend themselves, but it was all in vain. It wasn't that the serpent's hide was too strong and thick. Quite the contrary, their fists and blades speared straight through the body of the shadow beasts, however they simply reformed right after. They simply could not hurt them. Megumi had done this by summoning his great serpent without fully manifesting a stable form, expanding his attack range without risking destruction as well as allowing him to make as many copies of the Shikigami as he'd like. The trade-off was that the Shikigami could not operate independently of his shadow, but he compensated for this with his immense cursed energy by providing and forcing structure into their bodies with the power of his cursed energy reserves and guidance of his encyclopedic knowledge over his cursed technique. Within moments, all the curse users were slaughtered without any trouble, leaving behind only one of them who was currently trying to beg for his life. It was all in vain though, as he was simply ignored and muzzled by shadowy constraints that formed around him from the Orokai constructs. Maki walked back into the room, special grade cursed tool in hand. Cool blade, what's its name? Megumi asked even though he already knew the answer. He could almost feel Koge shaking slightly in shadow as if begging him to have a spar with her now that she has a cursed tool worthy of her strength. Dragonbone. Dragonbone is a thick single-edged blade with 3 engine-type holes in the back. The blade is connected to a highly mechanical hilt. The bottom section beneath the holes is covered by the extended hand guard, which has several square shapes protruding from it. In contrast to the hilt, it has a much less mechanical handle where the sword is gripped. The handle appears to be covered in stitched-together cloth and is decorated with a ribbon at the end of the hilt. This cursed tool has the ability to build up kinetic force as well as cursed energy. Dragonbone can eject both forces back out of the 3 engines to propel the blade at the user's will, granting it far greater cutting power than normal. Maki swung the blade around in her hands, as if trying to get used to its weight and handling. Grinning in delight as she did so, Juzo Kumiya might have been a disgusting sack of flesh, but there was no denying that he knew exactly what he was doing with the creation of such a pristine cursed tool. Wanna try it out? Got you some target practice. Megumi gestured to the side with his thumb at the captured curse user. Do I ever? Maki asked with a grin, walking up towards the lamb to the slaughter without a care even as he wiggled in vain to escape. Chick! With a single swing of her blade, the curse user, along with the wall behind him, was sliced apart in an instant. It didn't stop there either, as the force of the swing went on to cut open the side of the building and open up a clear path for the two of them to exit. "Oh Tilda, you weren't wrong. I could get used to this." She sighed out in satisfaction. She rested the special grade blade on her shoulder as the two of them walked out of the building, courtesy of its new quick express exit. "When have I ever lied to you?" When the two of them walked out, they saw a black car speed into the street before them with speeds that must have been 50 kilometers above the speed limit. The door of the car flew open as from it emerged Rin Otomo. She reached back into the car for a moment before pulling herself out with a small urn in her hands. "Young master, I humbly apologize for my tardiness. I will make no excuses." Rin cried out as she sped forwards, urn in hand, and somehow slid on the ground to stop just in front of Megumi while on one knee. "Please accept this late delivery of your request. I will take any punishment you see fit for this folly of mine." She raised the urn in her hands as if she was making an offering and awaited his response. "It's not a problem, Rin. It wasn't an easy task that I gave you after all. Get up. Did you get it with the modifications I asked for?" "I know they were rather last minute," Megumi questioned as he forced her to stand up on her 2 feet before grabbing the urn out of her hands. "Ah, yes, young master, it wasn't much trouble. The talisman is already in place," she explained, pulling her hands to rest behind her back in attention as she waited for him to continue at his own pace. "What's that?" Moki asked, curious as to what he was holding and also trying to find a place to holster her brand new cursed tool among her other 2 special grade cursed tools in a playful cloud and the black rope. "Another gift for you. I knew that traveling around with so many different tools would be less than convenient. So I thought ahead and commissioned my people to find a specific curse for you. It took a while, but they found it eventually, in Brazil of all places," Megumi explained as he reached a hand into the urn. He then pulled out a fairly long purple curse with segmented serpentine body. It was the same type of curse that Toji Fushiguro and eventually Suguru Geto had used. On its body was a detachable talisman that would allow the user to make it capable of being seen by even non-sorcerer eyes. This is an inventory curse that can store many different objects within its body. You can freely interchange your weapons by putting them in and taking them out of the curse's mouth. The curse can also shrink itself within its own body, allowing you to ingest it so people can't detect the curse energy it emits. Megumi offered the curse to Moki, who grabbed it tentatively and looked it up and down. "Hey, it's kinda cute. In a weird I wanna crush you into paste sorta way," she said, squashing its face slightly before placing it around her neck where it proceeded to slither around until it got comfortable. "Thanks Megumi, I'm sure it'll be really useful." Moki thanked with a genuine smile as she inserted her cursed tools into it, happy to have a more convenient way of transporting her tools around. "No problem," he replied. He was glad that she liked it without much issue. "Oh, and before I forget, Rin, thank you for your work. I know it wasn't easy finding one specific curse type out of millions throughout the whole world," Megumi said, a small grin covering his face as he turned to the amber-haired woman. "Please don't thank me, young master. I live to serve you after all. Your wish is my command." Rin simply bowed her head. She was content with merely being able to help him in whatever way possible. "Well then, my wish is for you to go on a break for a week. You've been working your ass off for too long. Go get some rest. You're no use to me if you're tired and weary after all," he ordered, knowing exactly what to say and how to say it to make sure she would listen. "Aye, very well, if that is what you want," she acquiesced with an even deeper bow, proving Megumi's theory immediately correct. 3 hours later, Megumi leaned back in the front chair of the black sedan. He was mostly tuning out the idle chatter from the one brain cell duo sitting behind him. The one driving the car was Akari Nitta, who had temporarily taken over Rin's duty as his auxiliary manager during her mandated holiday, although it had been a surprising call considering how it was on short notice. "Fushiguro-san, I heard that my little brother is being transferred over to your Tokyo branch soon. Do you have any idea about that?" Akari inquired, trusting that he would have the answers that she desired. Ah, him. Yes, he's being transferred to Tokyo soon, along with 2 others of his classmates. Megumi revealed, a grin hiding a tinge of malice covering his face as he remembered the deal he had struck with the old geezer. Principal Gakugunji and I had a little heart-to-heart. We agreed unanimously that Arata, along with 2 of his classmates, would find much better company and growth under different management. Yuji and Nobara listened on into his words with squinted eyes, both trying to figure out what he was really saying. They then turned to the other and looked into the other's eyes with a nod of tacit approval, as if they shared the same thought without having to talk. Heart to heart? Agreement? Doesn't he mean extortion and threats? They thought collectively, feeling a small bead of sweat fall down their foreheads. Even though he is a first year, he isn't going to be a student with the 3 of us. He'll be training under Shoko in the way to become an actual on-the-field emergency medic. He should fit right in with his cursed technique. Megumi explained. Wait. Who else is gonna join our school? Yuji asked, his brain having just caught up to all of the words that Megumi said. Oh yeah, who is it? Nobara questioned. It seemed like she had processed all the information given by Megumi at the same time that Yuji did. Todo and Miwa. Megumi answered before he paused a second later and reached for his phone as he had been reminded of someone more important and ignored his classmates' shouts. He pulled out his phone and scrolled till he found the page of someone very near and dear to him. Well, I'm glad he has someone like you rooting for him at his side, Fushiguro-san. Akari thanked genuinely, although her thanks was not required and fell upon deaf ears as he started to tune them all out. Looks like Shoko's enjoying Hawaii, the beach looks nice. And of course she has her Heineken at the ready. Megumi chuckled slightly as he watched the picture Shoko had on her profile. The picture was a side selfie of Shoko in a 2-piece swimsuit with a comically large hat. She was currently laying down under an umbrella with 2 bottles of Heineken, one in her left hand and the other being held in between her thighs as she took the selfie with her right hand. Behind her was a small veritable mountain of empty bottles. The bodyguard semi-grade 1 sorcerer he had hired for her protection and to serve as her guide had an expression of pure bewilderment but stayed his post nonetheless. Leave it, Shoko try to blaze new boundaries in what the human liver can handle. At least I know she's having a good time. I just hope she doesn't have a drunk Shoko's moment and flatten the western seaboard. When Megumi tuned back into their conversation when the car had stopped, he exited without much fanfare and looked around, frowning slightly as he did so. The sign on the main gate held a title emblazoned onto it, Saitama Municipal Urami East Junior High. Alright, the home of that Morishita dude was a bust. Hopefully here we'll get better answers. Yuji called out as he stretched his arms, walking to be by Megumi's side along with the other 2 of their small group. The quartet entered the grounds of school and walked around for a few minutes before Nobara found a duo of 2 students resting inside of an empty hallway as they shared a cigarette. Oh look, we got 2 punks over there. Let's go teach them some discipline and beat them up. She declared with way too much cheerfulness in her voice. However, all she could do was stand there nonplussed as the 2 of them dropped the cigarette and jumped up from their place in terror. They marched forwards 3 steps before bowing and shouting with all their heart. Good morning. We humbly apologize for not greeting you properly. To this Nobara and Yuji simply chuckled in haughty satisfaction, thinking the 2 punks to be bowing to them in reverence. Heh, that's more like it. Nobara commented. One's aura is hard to hide, huh? Yuji nodded his head along. We haven't seen you in too long, Fushiguro-san. Now that took the wind out of the one brain cell duo's proverbial sails, they turned to face Megumi with disgruntled expressions. This is my sister's old school, he revealed dismissively. The 2 of them blurred towards him with immense speeds before starting to squish his face with both their hands in annoyance before demanding answers. What the hell? Since when do you have a sister? Nobara demanded. Yeah, why did you never tell us you had a sister? Yuji agreed. Screw this, let's just ask them. He then said after turning away to point at the two punks. "You're right, idiot A, idiot B, what did this guy do to you?" She acquiesced and asked, still keeping her grip on Megumi's shoulder as she did so. "To us? Nothing. But everyone in the school knows about him. One time he came to pick up his sister from school and ran into her being confessed to by a guy that wanted to take her out on a date." One of the two punks explained, letting his friend continue the story. "He proceeded to break the guy's right knee. The poor dude still walks with a limp 3 years later last I heard. After that, no one dared upset her for the next few years till she left the school, although there were some of the girls who were trying to find him again." The other punk revealed. Nobara and Yuji both turned to Megumi with horrified expressions. The unspoken demand for answers caused Megumi to sigh. "He held impure thoughts about my sister. He had to be taught a lesson. Truthfully, he deserved worse than he got. He should be counting himself lucky," Megumi announced, not feeling even an ounce of shame. "Dude. He only gave her a flower and asked her out on a picnic," one of the punks muttered with horror evident in his voice. However, Megumi Fushiguro didn't seem to be fazed in the slightest as he simply declared, "My purpose standeth unchanged." He then walked forwards towards the two punks and looked them both in the eyes, uncaring of their very evident fear. "Now, I'm gonna need the two of you to start telling me everything you know about this school's dark secrets. Every bad rumor and gang, I want to hear it now." Several hours later. Yasuhachi Bridge Underpass. Never bothered to come here before since this curse has nothing to do with Tsumiki's curse, and it'll also serve doubly as a good chance to let Yuji and Nobara grow as sorcerers, Megumi thought as he walked down a slope to reach the bottom part of the bridge's underpass. Behind him were the aforementioned duo of sorcerers. They looked around with curious expressions at the seemingly quiet and peaceful atmosphere of what was supposed to be a cursed spirit hotspot. "I thought about saving Choso's brothers at some point, Kechizu and Iso. But I decided against it. They'll serve better as fuel to the fire that is Nobara's and Yuji's potential and strength. If they can hit at the very least one black flash as they did before, it would be a worthy exchange, especially so for Nobara." He looked around and found the place where the curse would most likely be located, but he didn't say so and took it as an opportunity to test the pink-haired teen's knowledge. "Yuji, this is the mission location, but we can't see any sign of the curses. Can you explain why this is the case?" Megumi asked, turning around to face him and crossing his arms in expectation. "But isn't it obvious where it is?" It's Kujisaki pointed out, beginning to answer his question for him but was stopped by the black-haired man's interjection. "Atatata! I know that you know that I know, and I know that you know. I want to know what he knows," he said, not caring to hide his intentions or that he was being needlessly complicated with his wording. "My head hurts." Yuji rubbed his forehead slightly in thought as he wrapped his head around what Megumi said. "But it's over there underneath in the crossway in between the bridge's underpass and the river, right?" He then called out as he pointed towards a small river directly beneath the large bridge. "Why, Aho? And why is that?" Megumi probed further. He looked as if he was a teacher guiding his young ward to the answer without giving it to them outright. Because of rituals and stuff. Symbolic or spiritual things like that have a lot of meaning in Jujutsu, so even crossing a river or breaking a mirror can be a catalyst to activating or incurring Jujutsu and curses. The pink-haired sorcerer answered cheerfully, fully sure that his answer was right. "Good, and what do you suppose would happen if we went into said passage?" The black-haired man prompted again, wanting to cross off one final thing off his checklist. "We'd get transported into an innate domain again like with that finger dude. And it'd be an incomplete one too, cause of how long the domain is being casted." Itadori answered, this time without hesitation since he had built up the confidence that he would be right. All correct. Good work, Yuji. Looks like you've actually been paying attention in our lessons. Megumi confirmed with a smile, happy that Yuji had internalized the lessons he had given him. Not like we had a choice, that blindfolded idiot is a shit teacher. Figures, geniuses are known to be bad at explaining things. Some about them never needing to be told the specifics cause it comes naturally to them and are alert. Nobara grumbled in annoyance at his words. She then scoffed, remembering that lessons that Gojo had given them, which consisted of him explaining things once and expecting them to immediately get it without further elaboration. And then his look of confusion when they asked him to explain it again. Yeah, Satoru struggles a bit with teaching the fundamentals and basics of Jujutsu knowledge. Ask him to show you how to cast a domain or use a lapse technique and he'd be able to do so in a heartbeat. But ask him to explain how they work and he'd stumble over himself. Megumi chuckled as he imagined him stumbling over words in an effort to answer a simple question about the basics, before he then started leading them towards the gateway into the barrier. However, he was forced to suddenly dig his heels down and focus on not falling over when Yuji had surprised him by jumping up and grabbing onto him from the back, holding onto him as he laughed cheerfully. It's fine though, cause we have you here to teach us whatever we need instead, Yuji declared, catching Megumi completely off guard with his light-hearted demeanor. Ha ha, whatever you say, Yuji. Megumi laughed as he balanced himself to try and not fall over from the sudden weight. God, you two are dumb. Focus up, will why, eh? We're on an important mission, aren't we? Lives are on the line. Nobara chastised, although she was holding back a small laugh herself by hiding it behind her hand. Yeah, whatever you say, Nobara. The pink-haired teen called out before putting strength into his arms and used Megumi's body as a jumping-off platform, sending himself flying upwards into the air. Yuji did a somersault and a front flip in the air before landing perfectly on one knee in front of the two of them. He pulled back his sleeves before speaking once more. Let's go exorcise some curses, he declared, a grin of confidence covering his face. This grin was wiped off when he received a surprise kick to the back of the head from a disgruntled Nobara Kuchisaki, causing him to fall over onto the ground before him. Huh? What was that for? He shouted, pulling himself up and turning to face her with an annoyed expression. Who died and made you the leader, huh? She demanded, pulling back her own sleeves as if getting ready to box him. When did I say I was the leader, bitch? He retorted as he came up to her and banged his head against hers. The two of them stayed like that for a moment, their foreheads pressed together as they seemed to be on the verge of fighting but were stopped when a hand was placed on both their heads. Calm down now, this is nothing to fight over, you two. Megumi placated, trying to get them to focus. It was as if a flip had switched with both of them as they turned to him, their previous animosity towards each other being all but forgotten. You want what he's having? Yeah. What she said. Megumi simply stared at them in amusement at the two of them. It seems like every day they proved to him how unhinged they were. Yeah, all right. Whatever. In you go, he announced before lifting the two of them by the top of their heads and simply throwing them forwards across the gap between the bridge and the river. He watched as both their screaming forms disappeared from view as they entered what must have been the innate domain of the curse. He sighed before shaking his head right afterwards and walked in after them. What am I gonna do with these two? As Megumi crossed the intersection between the bridge and the river, he found himself entering through a barrier and appearing inside an innate domain. It looked to be a normal cave system at first, but then formed the curse. Dozens if not hundreds of pillars made of pinkish growth sprouted from the walls and ceilings, connecting together the opposite ends of the cave. Then countless holes, as if they were wide open ant hills, opened up throughout the cave system. And then from one of those holes emerged the curse of the Yasuhachi Bridge. It was bulbous and almost mole-like, with 4 holes in its head that pass for eyes. So that's the curse? Itadori pointed out as he rolled his shoulders. Although he already knew the answer, he was trying to make sure that this is the curse that threatened to kill the people they were here to save. Well, dumbass, obviously it is. This is gonna be fun. I've been meaning to find something to hit. Kuchisaki replied, pulling out her hammer and nail to start the hunt, although her naginata and nail gun were holstered and ready to be used whenever needed. Should be a quick 20-minute in and out mission. You'll be done just in time to make it to that dinner Satoru wanted me to come to, Megumi said, walking forwards to be a foot ahead of them. Something about a brand new type of ramen he got his chef to make, although knowing him it'll probably be more sugar in weight than actual noodles. He then commented while casually ran a hand through his hair. "Wait, hold on, you? You're not gonna be helping us?" Yuji questioned, catching on to his seemingly odd choice in wording. "Nope. What use would having the two of you here be if I do all the work myself? You'll be taking care of the curse while I stand back and watch." The black-haired sorcerer revealed, a shit-eating grin covering his face as he did. "Well, that's just great, Tilda." Nobara groaned in annoyance but was stopped when she felt a sudden presence running up behind them, something that was picked up by both sorcerers on her side. "Another curse!" Yuji shouted, already moving forwards to defend the others even when not needed. "Right on cue, this one." Megumi thought with a slight smirk, happy that things went just as he planned. The curse is turquoise with a hunchback, claws, and two mouths with jagged teeth. It has a small face on the upper part of his head and a giant mouth just beneath it. Its eyes as well as both his mouth have dark blood dripping from it. It had what seemed to be a second smaller face where its forehead was supposed to be. "Who? There's other people here too." It spoke, its distorted voice sounding distinctly like a human male's would. "That's not the same curse, I'll take care of it. You guys deal with the first one." That was all Yuji Itadori said before he threw himself at the curse with full force. He sped forwards with immense speed before punching forwards with an unmatched ferocity. The curse made a sound that could only be described as surprised curiosity before it spat at him with a torrent of blood straight from its mouth. Yuji grunted in response to the unexpected move, choosing to weave to the side of the attack to avoid it before he swung backwards with his momentum and landed a roundhouse kick at the curse's second face, causing it to grunt in pain and jump back. "What? You want to play games with Ketchizu?" The curse asked, the tone of its distorted voice implying a sort of innocent playfulness. "Stand still and I'll show why, eh?" Yuji shouted before shooting forwards towards the curse once more, this time more mindful of any blood sprout as he assumed they would be poisonous in nature. Megumi stood back with arms crossed while watching his orange-haired classmate play whack-a-moles with the curse, although his face held a small smile as he watched her struggle to kill the curse due to its annoying habit of just running away, which wasn't all that odd considering its range of effect with its cursed technique. In reality, he was dead bored inside. He had accepted that he would have to stand back and watch the two of his classmates fight, but that hadn't prepared him for the boredom that would have to come with said fact. And so he zoned out, choosing to try and think up of a combination of Shikigami that would make up a particularly strong merged beast, at the very least until Iso shows himself to begin the true battle, the one that actually matters at any rate. What if I put Baku, Orokai, and Yuichi? Would that make a ginormous elephant-serpent hybrid capable of copying itself, or would it make tiny multiplying snakes that can shoot venom like a gun? Megumi considered, rubbing his chin in thought. He watched as Nobara made a noise of great annoyance at missing the curse once again before she pulled out her nail gun and started shooting at the curse with great abandon, each nail crushing another hole for the curse but not hitting directly. It seems like his presence had made the curse stronger than before once again. Oh, what about both divine dogs, New, Max Elephant and Funeral Tiger? Could even throw Great Serpent in there for its armor and extra physical strength. I know just what to call him. I'll call him Zero's dash. Megumi's line of thought was cut off by a sudden sound and a hole opening up in the domain. He wasn't the only one who noticed the sudden sound and shift in the domain. Nobara looked behind her and watched as a dark yet small hole opened up in the domain. From the hole emerged two human-looking hands. They reached forwards to try and grab the young sorceress. And perhaps they may have met their target in a different universe, but in this reality, that was not the case. Nobara Kujisaki twisted her body with incredible grace, grasping her naginata as she did so as she filled it to the brim with cursed energy. Then with a practiced and honed form, she swung her polearm at her attacker, slicing off one of his arms in a single move. Damn! They heard a loud grunt of pain echo through the hole in the barrier before the blood spurting from the severed limb straightened and connected together, linking both sides of the limb before the hand was pulled towards the stump. Both arms immediately retreated back out of the domain, indicating that their owner didn't wish to test his luck again. Big bro Iso. Kechizu screamed. He had recognized the arm and immediately ran towards the opened hole in the barrier to check on his brother. "Should we go after them?" Yuji asked as he ran towards his two classmates. Although he wanted to follow the curse, he wanted to make sure that they were all on the same page first. "Yeah, you two go after them. This won't take too long to finish on my side. The real problem is those two." Megumi agreed, unfolding his hands from their crossed state as he did so. He quietly started channeling his cursed energy, trying to create a merged beast unlike any other he had created thus far. Specifically taking care to manifest him within his own shadow so as to not alarm the others. He had even made a quiet incantation of his maximum technique, willingly weakening the merged beast in the process in order to hide it even further. "I'll take care of the bridge curse while the two of you kill the other two. They look to be the biggest problems. Watch out for the human-looking one. From what I just saw, he might be able to connect his limbs together with some kind of technique." He then explained, noting that using blood manipulation to link together your limbs was something Choso and Yuji had done before in his previous life. "Another consequence of me shifting the balance, I suppose, seeing more and more of those as of late. Sounds like the next few months are gonna be a pain in the ass." The black-haired man thought as he watched his two comrades nod to his words and move to the hole in the barrier. "Before the two of you go, you remember my last lesson, right?" Megumi questioned, causing them to pause and look back to him for a moment before they nodded again and repeated it to him. "Hesitation is defeat." With that, the two of them jumped through the gap in the barrier and out of the domain. He sighed in satisfaction, glad that they had remembered it, since he knew it would be important soon. And so he turned his attention back to the matter at hand. It was an important task after all. "I wonder, should I get Rin something for when she comes back from holiday? Perhaps maybe some wine, a gift basket? Or maybe a gift basket with wine?" Megumi thought aloud, all the while casually pointing a finger behind himself. At the tip of his finger formed a small yet bright bluish-black orb of pure cursed energy, a gain from his use of his funeral tiger incarnation which helped him refine his cursed energy manipulation enough to be able to output it at will. The small orb of energy then shot forwards with speeds that surpassed hypersonic, landing right in the middle of the Yasuhachi Bridge curse's head, killing it instantly. He felt the cursed energy of the innate domain around him writhe for a moment as it shifted around with malevolent intent. Instead of being spread around the entire cave system, it all coalesced together in a single spot before shredding apart and revealing a brand new yet still familiar curse. "Another finger bearer? God, it's like Gijran. Out of ideas." Megumi commented with a raised eyebrow, vaguely remembering the name of the author that had made the original manga he had read so many years ago. The finger-bearer watched on with a mixture of curiosity and indignation as its prey just turned away from it and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small rectangular brick which he then started tapping away at. "Well, whatever, I'm not interested in you in the slightest. Dealing with you personally would be like bullying a baby," Megumi said, scrolling through his phone and reading some messages from his people telling him about a meeting with a higher manager in Jujutsu HQ that wanted to meet him personally. "I have better things to do, die." As if on cue, the finger-bearer felt a pain unlike any other spike through its body. Looking down towards itself, it gaped in horror as it saw a huge clawed yet armored arm covered with fur piercing through its body. And then, before the special grade curse could even grunt or gasp in pain, it died. The finger-bearer faded away into dust, the innate domain around Megumi already falling apart and fading away, revealing a forest which held the scars of a hard-fought battle. "Good work, beast reagent," Megumi commented, not turning around to face his creation but looking forwards towards where he sensed a tense battle going on, probably where the fight between his classmates and the death paintings was taking place. "It is my honor, Shade Lord." A deafening voice responded to him. It sounded gruff as if it came from a proud king of old or from a warrior of great renown. Megumi watched a giant clawed hand move to his side. Its hand, which was clenched into a fist, opened up to reveal a lone purple waxy finger inside its armored, blood-ridden claws. It stood as a testament to the overwhelming power of this merged beast that despite being severely weakened due to its summoning conditions, it still killed the special grade curse in one hit. "Thanks, you may leave." he ordered, walking off towards his friends without turning around as tendrils of shadows formed from his back. They shot forwards before latching onto the lone finger from the beast's claw and absorbing it into his abyss for later use. Very well, I shall eagerly await thy call, Shade Lord. With that, the maximum merged beast, for now only known as the beast reagent, faded away. When Megumi arrived at the location of the battle, he looked to have only caught the tail end of it. Battles are usually decided rather quickly after all. All it took was 1 or 2 missteps to decide who would live or who would die. Sorcerers can never afford to make mistakes. After all, hesitation is defeat. Kujisaki Nobara and Itadori Yuji stood side by side, with the twin curses surrounding them at both sides. Their faces and bodies were marred with a crimson floral pattern that burned with cursed energy that signified the activation of a cursed technique. Megumi chose to sit down upon a nearby boulder to have a bird's eye view of the battlefield and observe their fight properly. He watched as Nobara laughed with malice, drawing the attention of the death painting named Isos as far as he remembered. A technique where you win if it hits once, huh? You guys sure are strong. But it's just too bad. She chuckled, reaching into her belt pouch and pulling out a nail, all the while raising her other arm, the one that was afflicted with the death painting's rot. I'm a bad match for you. Sparing no time for thought or delay, she then spiked herself with her nail and activated her cursed technique extension, Straw Doll Technique, Resonance. With her call came a pulse from her soul, which connected and intertwined with the twin cursed wombs, causing the pulse to shoot through their interlinked souls thanks to the Supreme Rot technique which was previously implanted into both Nobara and Yuji. Spikes shot out of Iso's and Kechizu's bodies in response to the effect of Nobara's resonance technique, pain shooting into them through the deepest parts of their souls, leaving them completely open to a counterattack as the pain utterly paralyzed their bodies. Both death paintings lurched over in agony, yet they were still assured that no further attack could be done since while they were paralyzed in pain, so too were their opponents. However, that was not the case for the vessel of the strongest, who despite feeling his body go through unimaginable pain from the effect of Iso's rot, marched ahead with absolute ironclad will. For if there is only pain, Itadori Yuji will never stop. His fists shot forwards towards Kechizu like vipers, each punch shattering bone and cartilage alike with disturbing ease. The sorcerer's eyes burned with purpose and betrayed an inextinguishable flame of unshakable resolve. Kechizu! Iso cried out for his brother, abandoning all offense to try and intercept the sorcerers and protect his twin death painting. It was as if he felt the pain his brother did. Shut up! That was all Nobara shouted in response before piercing herself with another nail, activating yet another resonance, all the while she swapped places with her partner. No words were needed between the two of them as they fought with unparalleled synergy. The sorcerers didn't dare to pause, moving forwards while their opponents were stunned by another resonance. They had swapped targets, with Yuji readying up a haymaker for Iso and Nobara withdrawing her Naginata with intent to finish off the weakened curse in Kechizu. In his hurry, he had deactivated his Supreme Rot technique as he deemed it a liability and instead utilized a halo of blood that surged out of his back to try and spear through the orange-haired sorcerer and save his brother. But it was all too late. His blood spears will never reach their target. And although both sorcerers still felt the immense agony left behind by the twin death paintings' rot, all it did was hone their wills into razor-sharp edges. In a different world, Itadori Yuji may have even faltered at the sight of a curse, worrying for what it considered a brother, but that was not the case anymore. For a simple, yet powerful lesson had been ingrained into his soul for the past several months. Jujutsu sorcerers cannot afford to make mistakes. Hesitation is defeat. Black sparks flowed throughout the bodies of both sorcerers. For Itadori Yuji, they flowed into his fist from the deepest reaches of his soul. And for Kujisaki Nobara, they formed right at the edge of her Naginata's blade, painting its once pale white hues a dull black. Black flash! Kechizu's turquoise body was first to be eviscerated. It was torn apart right down the middle with a single swipe of her blade. The death painting had nary a time to even think before he died, a fitting end to a tortured soul. Yuji Itadori watched on as tears formed in Iso's eyes even before his brother died, and although he was not going to allow himself to falter, the pink-haired sorcerer's innate kindness was something he could never suppress. And so he had chosen to grant the cursed womb a mercy, a quick and painless ending. One without any unneeded suffering. A proper death for one born to be cursed such as he. Splat, the battle had ended, almost as quickly as it had started. Both Nobara Kuchisaki and Yuji Itadori greedily took in breath after breath to regain their composure after the battle, and after a few minutes they both looked at their unfading former opponent with a slight tinge of dread. For the two death paintings did not fade away as curses did when they died, their brutalized corpses remained where they laid. Looks like it's finally over. They both managed to hit a black flash with Yuji even listening to the advice I gave him when subjugating Tranquil Deer. Good for them. Megumi thought. He then jumped down from his place on the boulder where he waited for the battle to end. Must be Nobara's first, no? I bet she's feeling like she's in a whole new world right about now. The difference in your jujutsu before and after a black flash is no small thing after all. What I would give to feel that high again, Tilda. He reminisced with a sigh while walking towards the two of them to congratulate them on their successful mission. However, Fushiguro Megumi need not long for that rush again, nor should he envy his comrades for touching upon the nirvana of black sparks. As in less than 2 months, on the night of what would later be named as the Shibuya eclipse, he too would undergo his own true awakening. The likes of which could be considered a second rebirth. Good job, you two. Megumi called out, hailing a hand towards the sky as he did to gather their attention while he kept the other in his pocket. Managed to take out both cursed wombs without taking too much damage. That's some fine work from the two of you. He said, channeling his Tranquil Deer incarnation as he did so in order to heal their wounds. But it was light work. Only annoying part was the tall one's blood spears or whatever. They were too fast and too hard to dodge. Well, that and this poison, you got anything for that? Nobara answered, rubbing her left arm as she did so. Unfortunately not. As useful as reverse cursed technique is, it can't completely wipe away all traces of poisons. So you'll have to deal with the effects of the poison, although I'll help clear away most of the damage that it'd do. Megumi explained, raising a hand and offering it to her. Really? How annoying. Well, whatever. Get to it, will why, eh? I'd rather not get scars. Nobara responded, meeting his arm with her own rotten-infested limb. Megumi grasped her hand gently with his, careful to not aggravate her wounds. And a second later, the familiar aura of his positive energy flowed from his body like a geyser and into hers. The orange-haired sorcerer sighed in satisfaction as she felt her body and arm be restored back to their fullest health. She never got tired of the sensation no matter how many times she felt it. Yuji should be dealing with this better than you though. He's Sukuna's vessel and that grants him an inherent immunity to poison. He commented just as he had completed restoring her body to the best condition it could possibly be, although traces and remnants of the poison remained. Of course the idiot gets free resistance, lucky bastard. Yuji, you okay? Nobara griped for a moment at the knowledge that her friend just had such an immunity intrinsically, but she stopped when she saw the look on his face. Her reaction drew Megumi's attention. He turned around to face what she looked upon and paused as well. Itadori Yuji had a look of pure defeated remorse. Megumi's ringed crimson eyes softened at the sight. He walked forwards towards his friend and reached out to him. He grasped the shorter man's shoulder and channeled his reverse cursed technique into him. And although the wounds on the vessel faded away, the wounds on his spirit were much harder to heal. What's wrong, Yuji? He asked, leaving behind all pretenses and simply reaching a caring hand towards a friend. Fushiguro, you said you killed someone before. Right? Asked the pink-haired man, his eyes not leaving the ground beneath them. Megumi almost physically recoiled at that question, because while it had been something he expected to answer at some point, the choice to use his last name had taken him off guard. So he took a moment to think clearly about his answer before choosing to remain honest with his friend. Yes, I did. He answered. The candid answer drew his classmate's eye back to his own right as he finished healing his body completely. When you killed them, did you feel anything? Sadness? Regret? Anger? Itadori questioned. He didn't just want an answer, he needed it, desperately. Megumi Fushiguro looked his friend directly in the eyes and answered. No, I did not. I felt nothing. The answer came to him quickly, naturally. He didn't feel a need to think or consider his words, for they were only the truth. As far as I can remember, I've never cared for the lives of those that I didn't know or threatened me. And, to be frank with you, I don't even remember the first time I took a life. Megumi admitted, his eyes searched his friend's own for any emotions even as he continued his words. Do you find that disturbing? Unsettling? Cold-hearted? With that, Megumi Fushiguro laid his soul bare. He had given his piece, and was allowing his dear friend to come to a conclusion all his own. I don't know. That was all Itadori Yuji could say for a time, and so Megumi had allowed him time to think, to reflect and contemplate. Nothing was more important to him than making sure his friend was ready for the road ahead, as he knew above all else, the world would not be so kind as to allow him that same luxury a second time. There was a time where I think I would have. Before meeting you, before Sukuna, before any of this. But now? Now, I'm not so sure. Yuji confessed, the vessel of the strongest was feeling an odd kind of nostalgic melancholy. I'm happy that Nobara and I survived and came out unharmed, but I still feel sad for the life I had to take along the way to get there, that despite winning, tears were shed from my actions. I just don't know if I am in the right here, that's all. As Yuji finished his confession, he looked towards his comrades. He was unsure of what he even expected when he did so, perhaps doubt? Or maybe it would be the same apprehension he felt. What he didn't expect were two soft smiles, ones without judgment or cynicism. It's normal to be unsure, dummy. When you're a sorcerer, you don't always have the time to think about whether the things we do are good or bad, you just do. Nobara laughed quietly, brushing a few strands of hair behind one of her ears idly as she did so. And I guess if it was a bad thing to do, it would make us all accomplices in our actions, no? She questioned almost playfully, moving her already moving hand to rest at her hip. To that, Itadori Yuji felt a gentle smile of his own form. Now then, let's make merry, shall we? We still have that dinner from Satoru to go to. Megumi called out, wrapping an arm around each of them as he did so. It's probably gonna be some disgusting shit too. Nobara groaned as she tried to imagine what kind of food he would give them. Well, it can't be that bad if Gojo-sensei likes it. Yuji placated, placing his doubts to the back of his mind. For now, perhaps just living his life and finding out his own standard for right and wrong along the way would be a good start. The next day, Megumi entered a shop in the afternoon. It was a quiet flower shop with only 2 other customers inside. He walked ahead with purpose and went towards a corner which had white flowers. Welcome! Fushiguro-san. You're back again, the usual. The store attendant asked. She kept a cheerful yet professional smile on her face as she greeted him. Yes, Kobayashi-san, the usual. He stood there for a moment as she turned around, grabbing an empty bouquet as she did. He reached into his jacket to access his inventory, pulling out a wallet from it. When the store clerk Kobayashi came back to him, she held in her hands a large bouquet of flowers. The petals are pure white, creating a striking contrast with the glossy, dark green leaves that surround it. The flower has a soft, rounded shape, often with layers of petals that overlap tightly in the center, gradually loosening towards the edges. Here you go, sir, she said, handing him the bouquet, which he took with a quiet thanks. He followed her to the small cash register at the corner of the store and handed her a credit card. White camellias and lilies again, ho Fushiguro-san. Kobayashi commented, filling the silence between them with idle chatter as the card machine peeped to prompt the user to insert a password. Yes, they were her favorite ones. Health and rebirth, it's kind of an odd choice for her to make now that I think about it. Megumi answered, feeling a slight sense of melancholy as he entered the password for the card. Beep. Well, I'm glad you like them. Have a good day. She spoke cheerfully while handing him the card back. He grabbed it along with the bouquet and left the store without another word. Megumi stood outside the store for a moment, absent-mindedly putting his wallet back into his inventory. He brought the flowers up to his nose and smelled them again, with an expression that implied he was trying to understand something. I still don't get the big idea about these. They smell just like regular flowers to me. But she was always a flower nerd, so maybe there's something special about them, I dunno. He muttered under his breath. A sudden shake in his shadow caught his attention, however. He curiously reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone and saw it was a call from Nobara. Hello? What is it? Yo, get your ass over to the location I'm gonna send. It's important. What's so important you needed to call me on our day off? There's a girl here from Yuji's old school. We need info on the idiot. I'll be there in a minute. Faster. With that, he closed the call and sighed lightly. Looking around for a moment, he saw that there was nobody around, and so he carefully dropped the bouquet of flowers into his shadow. Megumi felt the bouquet enter the shadow and into his inventory, where it floated for a moment before it was removed a second later. He then started sprinting ahead towards an indeterminate location. Halfway across the country was one of Megumi Fushiguro's clones. He pulled out the flowers from his shadow and walked towards a windowsill. He unwound the bouquet and inserted the flowers into a vase right after emptying it. The clone then proceeded to go sit back down on his chair. By his side was a small notebook which he opened again. Inside the notebook were painstakingly organized and meticulous notes about the soul. He even had diagrams referencing both the body and soul as one. Why aren't there any damned records on the soul around? Having to figure all this shit out from scratch is really getting on my nerves. Maybe I should try to contact Yuki? She would definitely know way more about the soul than I do. The clone sighed in annoyance before going back to his studies of the soul. He had a long road ahead of him. Reconstructing and researching the soul was not something one could do to a masterful degree without outside help in a short time after all. Back with the original Megumi, he had stopped himself right before a small quaint coffee shop. He brushed off some dust on his jacket and walked in. Immediately the smell of grown coffee invaded his enhanced nose, causing him to grimace in annoyance. This is why I don't go out to places anymore and just get Rin to do it for me. This shit is just annoying. Megumi blocked his nose with his finger for a moment, reaching into his jacket out of habit, looking for something to block it indefinitely. Megumi! Over here! He looked up and searched for the owner of the voice. He found it eventually in Nobara, who was waving for his attention. By her side was a brown-haired girl with what seemed like a permanent timid expression. The black-haired man walked over towards the two of them, and when he arrived he greeted them with a small wave before turning to his classmate. Yo, you got a face mask on you by any chance? He asked, all the while he gestured for her to move over so he could sit down. I don't think so. Why? Nobara moved over to the side, checking for one as she did so but didn't find one. My nose is getting stuffy from the smell of coffee. It's too concentrated here. Megumi rubbed his nose in annoyance once more as he sat down. Here, I have one. The black-haired man turned to face the girl in front of him. He spotted a black face mask in her hands, which he gratefully took and wore. That's much better. Sorry, it's rude of me to take something of yours without even asking your name. Would you please humor me? He asked, resting his head on a hand as he did so. My name is Yuko. Azawa Yuko, it's nice to meet you. She introduced herself, a small smattering heat covering her face as she did so. Yuko is a tall girl with short brown hair that extends to her shoulder with straight bangs that cover her forehead. She wears a cream-colored baggy sweater that extends past her waist, a long lime skirt that extends all the way down to her ankles, and white high-heeled shoes with brown tips. I was Itadori's classmate back in junior high. I wanted to ask, does Itadori have a girlfriend? Yuko asked timidly, twiddling her index fingers together as she did. Oh, so it's like that, huh? Megumi asked. Yeah, it's exactly like that. Nobara confirmed. He definitely doesn't have a girlfriend. He's got a poster of a model in a bikini in his room, and he also didn't really care much when he had to move over to Tokyo. he answered after taking a moment to think. Really? Do you happen to know what kind of girls he likes? Kujisaki questioned, wanting to be sure before going forward with anything. To that, Megumi Fushiguro just smirked and turned his head to the side while it was resting on his hand as if in thought. Might as well go all the way here, Yuji deserves it. He thought before facing them again with an expression that hid deep amusement. I remember he said something about liking tall brunettes. Now that had gotten an immediate reaction from both girls whose entire demeanor changed in an instant. You have a real shot, I'll call him right now. You okay with that, Ozawa? Nobara declared, standing up in place and tapping away at her phone instantly. Oh yeah. The brown-haired girl responded. Resoluteness had completely overtaken her once timid face. A few seconds of typing later, Nobara finished and sat back down to wait for Yuji to arrive. What now? How are we gonna do this? She asked, drawing a look of apprehension from Yuko. We aren't doing anything. Get up, we have to let the two of them sit down and talk, otherwise it would be too awkward for the two of them to do anything remotely romantic. Megumi ordered, getting up from the chair and motioning for her to follow him. You sure that's a good idea? What if he doesn't recognize her from her new look? She replied, wanting to be sure before leaving the other girl to the proverbial wolves. Trust me, he's got this. With that, Nobara had gotten up from the bench and followed him in getting to a safe distance away to observe the two of them. Oh, Anazawa. Megumi called out before leaving the store. Hey, why yes? Yuko answered. She was in the middle of hyping herself up to do this. Yuji's a bit thick in the head, but a little honesty will go a long way with him. He stated while tapping his temple for emphasis, before waving a hand at her and leaving the coffee shop. Nobara followed him out while sending a thumbs up to the brunette as she did so. All right. Megumi and Nobara walked off a few feet away from the shop and made their way towards the opposite side of the road, hiding in a nearby restaurant in order to observe the coffee shop without Yuji spotting them. Just in time too, as a few seconds after they had sat down, Yuji himself had arrived and entered the store. They were thankfully able to see the interactions between the two of them since their seat was next to a glass window. From what they could see, it was a pleasant chat with giggles and laughs shared from the both of them. 20 minutes and a small bribe to the restaurant employees later, they watched Yuko Ozawa exit the store with an excited, giddy smile. Megumi Fushiguro and Nobara Kujisaki looked at each other with proud grins, before they slammed their hands together in celebration. Clap! Mission accomplished. October 19th, 2018. A mission from Satoru? Megumi looked up from a notebook. It had a white cover with a red symbol on the back that meant secret. It was a small record of Yuki Tsukumo's own research into the soul. He had been able to get it surprisingly easily by just asking the special grade sorcerer for one in exchange for a future favor. And while he wasn't sure what that favor would be, it probably wouldn't be too bad. Yes, it's a secret mission. We're out to capture a traitor to Jujutsu tech. We believe that it might be one of your classmates. Yutaheim explained, feeling somewhat nervous about the situation and also despising the fact that it was one of her own students that turned traitor. Sounds important, Megumi. We should probably go check it out. Nobara told him from his right. She was standing in a shooting position with her nail gun at the ready as she aimed towards a dartboard. The barely perceptible sound of a soft click followed by several small objects flying out could be heard before 8 nails shot out one after another and nailed directly into the bullseye. Each nail was driven into the previous one as they all landed in the exact same spot. The orange-haired woman smirked at this before turning to her side. Her face was overtaken by an annoyed grimace at what she saw. Yuji was sitting next to Megumi on the couch with his phone open. He had a small smile on his face. For hell's sake, we get it, you have a girlfriend. Now can you please pay attention for once, you potato-headed dunce? She said exasperatedly. It was already getting on her nerves to see him with that same smile all the time. Please do, this is absolutely disgusting to be forced to look at. Sukuna agreed, creating a mouth on his vessel's face to let his thoughts be known. To him, it could be considered a form of torture for the king of curses to be forced to watch a teenage romance unfold. Who? But she's not my girlfriend. Yuji denied adamantly, with a smattering of pink covering his face, making sure to slap away Sukuna's frowning mouth from his face as he did. Huh? Then what the hell was all that trouble we went through for then if you were just gonna get cold feet and fumble at the end? Nobara demanded, already marching forwards towards him with intent to beat some sense into him for supposedly wasting her time. Well, when she told me how she felt, I was kinda surprised at first. And I mean, I wasn't against it, but I just dunno if I can commit to an actual relationship with her as things stand now. He started explaining, rubbing the back of his neck as he did. Especially with Suguna still in my body, I can't in good conscience get with someone when I know that at some point I might die and leave them behind. It's just not right. Yuji asserted, all semblances of uncertainty leaving his voice in doing so. Now that had gotten Nobara to quiet down, she had never even considered that part of the equation. It was true to an extent, getting together with someone is a big decision, and doing so while knowing that your life was on a timer was an even bigger one. But Azawa looked positively giddy when we saw her leave the coffee shop, so something must have happened between you two. Megumi remarked, looking at the pink-haired man from the corner of his eye. I asked her to take it slow to think about it and to get to know her a little more before I made any final decisions. She seemed happy with the idea, so we exchanged numbers and went along our ways. The pink-haired man answered. Now we talk pretty much every day. There, you happy now? Can we stop talking about my love life and about this top-secret important mission from Gojo-sensei? He concluded, his face becoming beet red from the embarrassment and indignation. Satisfied with his answer, his two classmates turned to Yuta again for the first time in a while. The black-haired woman had the expression of rage and suicidal intent. I am going to choke that man tonight for making me listen to his students' love live. She thought, a small vein bulging on her forehead. Ah, sorry Iori-san. That was rude of us to ignore you like that. Megumi apologized with a small smirk, knowing that at the very least this could prompt Satoru a bit of headache later on. It's no problem, Fushiguro-kun. Now can we please head out? We mustn't let Kokichi Muta get a chance to escape, she declared, urging them to follow her quickly. I won't be going, but Yuji and Nobara will go. They should be more than enough for him. The black-haired man answered as if it was a done deal. He just kept reading from Yuki Tsukumo's record. What, are we your lackeys now? Nobara questioned with not a small hint of indignation in her voice. To that, Megumi just looked up from his book slightly and met her annoyed brown eyes with his own crimson ones, which held a sense of endless amusement. They continued their impromptu staring contest for the next 2 minutes as Nobara tried her best to not blink, even reinforcing her eyes with cursed energy, but it was for naught. Megumi's eyes were simply not human. They were adapted and evolved to be able to see without the need to blink for hours, even while flying at max speeds. The orange-haired girl inevitably and helplessly blinked before screaming in frustration at the loss. Ah, damn it, fine. Come on, Yuji, let's go do this. Nobara grabbed Yuji by his shirt and dragged him away towards Yuta, who looked at Megumi in confusion only to receive a shrug in response. She just went along with this and walked off with them while shaking her head, now convinced that history was doomed to always repeat itself. With him finally getting some peace and quiet, Megumi continued reading the record intently. But thoughts about the mission that his friends were going on still circulated in his head. Although he had considered Mechimaru to be useless or not worth the effort of saving considering his fate, perhaps there is a chance he can swoop in and save the man after Mahito had healed him. Before he closed the book and got up from his chair, his eyes unconsciously lingered on one specific line within the records. Even if souls mix together to some degree, they will never become one. Interesting. 30 minutes later. At an indeterminate location in Kyoto. This is the only possible location for where he could be, not like he could have gotten all that far, what with his broken body and all. Megumi muttered under his breath. He was currently flying about 200 meters up in the skies above a local Kyoto forest in hopes of spotting where Mechimaru could possibly be. Soon enough, Megumi picked up on the residuals of cursed energy. One was from a curse and one from a human, and so he had immediately sped off in the direction of that cursed energy like a bloodhound. Looks like I just missed the action. What Megumi laid his eyes on was the destroyed remains of a green mech, its broken body laid out against the forest. Cracks ran along its entire form, with the greatest damage being concentrated around the head of the mech, with there being a massive hole which would presumably lead to the cockpit. I can't tell if he's alive or dead from out here because of the cursed energy remnants around the area. Mahito must have just used his domain and left with the rat not too long ago. He deduced, flying down to the ground to get a closer look. Megumi landed at the cockpit of the mech, placing a hand against the cracked wall and laying his eyes on hell of a sorry sight. There laid the broken form of Kokichi Muta, otherwise known as Mechamaru. His stomach was gutted open and his limbs crippled beyond repair. So that's what happened to him. A final act of cruelty, given true freedom for the first time just to have it snatched away at the last second. And in the end, they left him to die slowly and in agony. Megumi whispered, feeling not an insignificant amount of pity for the man despite his betrayal. Poor bastard. But what Megumi saw next really shocked him. Kokichi Muta's eyes fluttered slightly. The broken man hazily opened his eyes, and with the combination of all his blood loss, agony, and failing organs, he saw something unbelievable. It was hard for Mechamaru to see anything through the haze of blood and pain, but his failing eyes could spot a vague figure through the fog that had come to consume his mind. It was a tall man, and although whispering in an incoherent voice, his pity and empathy was obvious in his tone. His figure was almost heavenly from his perspective, framed with a halo of golden light. His hair flowed in the breeze, and most damning of all was two glorious wings sprouting from his back. An angel? That had gotten Megumi Fushiguro to take a pause. He had expected to be called many things throughout his life, but an angel's was not one of them. The hell? Well, there's a first time for everything, I suppose, but maybe I can use this to my advantage. It would be a waste to let him die here, but I can't let him ruin my plans for Shibuya. I got it! Time to see if my time role-playing in RPGs in the past was worth something. Megumi thought as he got a devious idea. Yes, Kokichi Muta, I have come here to save you. Megumi announced, purposely making his voice sound as angel-like as possible. But first, I need you to agree to accept me as your leader. Someone who you will not and cannot disobey under any circumstances. He ordered, reaching a hand towards the broken man and activating his tranquil deer incarnation. Come on now, Mechamaru, just say it fast, damn it. I don't want you to die. Megumi's eyes gained rings as positive energy flooded into his arm, ready to restore the injured sorcerer in an instant as soon as he heard the words he wanted. What do why you mean? Kokichi mumbled, his brain working overdrive even in its oxygen-starved state to understand what was happening. Come now, Kokichi, won't you think of your classmates? Do you not wish to meet with them? What of your partner Miwa Kasumi? Won't she be sad if she heard that you died without cleansing yourself of your sins? Yes, you're right. I need to meet up with everyone. Whatever you want, even if you're the devil. I will follow you to the ends of the earth. Just heal me. That was all Kokichi Muta was able to say before sleep took his consciousness once more, but that was all Megumi Fushiguro needed to hear. He laid his hand on the dying man's head and channeled his borrowed reversed cursed technique. Positive energy flooded down his limb like a geyser. And before his eyes, the broken man's body was slowly but surely restored back to its fullest form. His limbs righted themselves with a sickening crunch as his guts returned to where they belonged right before his stomach closed up. It was indeed a divine miracle, no doubt about it. Nobody else in the world could have saved Kokichi Muta from his injuries short of a collaborative effort from many different healers, and even then it was not guaranteed that he would be able to move again. With his work done, Megumi found a spot to sit down near the broken wall of the mecha's cockpit and sat down to wait. He looked outside into the forest and at the golden light of the setting sun that shined throughout the forest's canopy. It was truly a gorgeous sight. A few minutes later, Mechamaru made subtle grunting sounds as he woke up. When he awakened, he looked around himself at the broken mech around him, and then down to his fully restored body, before finally looking back up at the angel that had saved him from certain death. Kokichi is a slim young man with light peach skin and sharp brown eyes. He had black hair tied into a top knot above his head. Only a single scar on his cheek remained after his restoration, and he was able to stand up on his own. Like his Mechamaru stand-in at school, Kokichi donned a normal Jujutsu high uniform with a white puffy scarf-like cloth around the collar of it. "You're finally awake. Megumi Zenin? How are you here? Were you the one that saved me?" Mechamaru watched as the wings on the special grade sorcerer's back twitched and faded into shadows, leaving behind only a few falling obsidian feathers. The man turned completely around to face him in his sitting position, causing him to flinch back from the accusing look of his crimson eyes. "Yes, I was. Now would you care to explain why the hell a traitor like you would be all the way out here in the middle of nowhere, half dead with the residuals of a special grade curse in the air?" he demanded, although he already knew the answer. This prompted Mechamaru to go on a long and winding rant about his deal with the curse Mahito and Suguru Geto in exchange for restoring his body, explaining how he had planned to betray them and escape after being healed but was unable to. "And that's why you need to tell Satoru Gojo about their plan. He can't be sealed," Mechamaru pleaded, knowing that while he might listen to him, Gojo could listen to Megumi instead. "No. I will allow their plan to happen," Megumi revealed, turning away and looking towards the sunset again. "What? Why?" Mechamaru questioned, unable to understand why he would allow this to happen. "The chaos created from this incident is the perfect set of circumstances and time for me to take over the entirety of Jujutsu HQ. It'll be undeniable proof that the old farts and clans can't handle anything of this magnitude and that it's time for a change." His confession left Kokichi completely speechless, as even though he too wanted change to happen, is it worth such a risk? And if Satoru does get sealed with the prison realm, that still benefits me too, Megumi added. How? How would that be a good thing? Mechamaru asked after a few seconds of silence. "You wouldn't know this, but the head of the Zenin clan, Naobito Zenin, made a contract with my father before his death," Megumi said, recalling the deal Toji had made and drawing a confused look from the other sorcerer. "If Satoru Gojo has died or become incapacitated for any reason, a written agreement concluded with Toji Fushiguro will welcome Megumi Fushiguro into the Zenin clan. Whereupon he shall become the head of the Zenin clan and all assets shall pass to him." There was another moment of silence after Megumi had finished reciting the contract. He was allowing Mechamaru to take in all the information for some time before he spoke up again. "Say, Kokichi, do you believe in fate?" The question seemed to come out of nowhere for Kokichi. The now restored man stumbled forwards from his spot within the mech and walked forwards Megumi. He stayed quiet, not knowing what to say, and sat down next to him, looking ahead at that same golden horizon. "I can't say I do." "Why?" he answered after a few seconds of silence. "I too don't believe in fate, although it would be more accurate to say I didn't believe in fate. I used to think that everything in the world could be changed with enough planning and work, but now I question that," Megumi said, recalling the time where he had tried to stop Sukuna's revival only for things to go as they were fated to regardless. "So I decided to let fate decide for once. I will warn Satoru about going to that meeting. I'll tell him how it's a terrible idea and he could get sealed for all we know. I'll even offer to come with him or use my domain Shorehit to send him help from afar," he continued, absent-mindedly summoning Blizzard by his side and petting his head. "But if he refuses? I'll let him go in without any help. And if at the end, fate decides that Satoru has to be sealed? Then so be it. I am more than strong enough to deal with the outcome of that." Kokichi Muta looked at the face of the man beside him. Just from his expression alone, he could see that he had not come to this decision lightly. "Fushiguro Megumi. What kind of person are you, really? Something in my soul draws me to you. I've observed countless people in my life of confinement, but none have made me this perplexed. I want to understand you. Just what is the method behind your madness?" I believe that is a poor decision. He simply stated. Maybe. But it's mine to make. Megumi replied. He had not an ounce of doubt in his body. The puppet master found himself speechless again, for a reason he couldn't understand. Any objections he had died in his throat as soon as he looked into the crimson eyes of the man beside him. But even if it does come to that, I won't lie down and allow fate to screw me as it wishes. I will screw it right back. I have planned out everything and prepared for this. He declared a few seconds later, raising a fist to the sky in a show of defiance. For the prison realm, it wouldn't be too big of an issue for long because I know Jujutsu HQ is in possession of the back door to the prison realm. I can use both the inverted spear of heaven and the black rope to break it open as soon as I am done with this incident in Shibuya. Megumi revealed, drawing a small gasp from the man beside him. Truly? Those are practically myths from all the rumors I've heard, but if you have both of them and the back door of the prison realm, then it won't be an issue at all to unseal Satoru Gojo right after the attack. Mechamaru pointed out, happy that there was at least a viable solution to their biggest problem. Exactly, so for now, you need to lie low. Every Jujutsu sorcerer is out for your head and you're more useful to me if no one knows that you're still alive. Megumi agreed, reaching into his shadow and pulling out a phone before handing it to him. You're gonna communicate with my people through this phone. You'll stay dead until the Shibuya incident occurs and then you're gonna collaborate with them. Your priority will be to help them evacuate all the civilians from the district. Along with that, you're gonna capture as many curses as possible. The civilians I get, but what do you mean capture curses? Kokichi asked for clarification. If he was going to pull off this insane plan, he needed as much information as possible. Exactly as it sounds, I've had my people spend a shit ton of resources into creating and acquiring high-grade cages for curses. This is all to feed my Shikigami, Funeral Tiger. He has the ability to devour the remnant cursed energy of anything that dies in his vicinity. I'm sure you can understand the gravity of such an ability in this situation. Mechamaru had the expression of bewilderment. Despite his research, he hadn't learned of this specific Shikigami's abilities before since it was such a well-guarded secret. But Megumi Zenin was not wrong. The possibilities such an ability would grant are too great to let go to waste. Fine, if that's what you want me to do. But don't you think you're being too greedy here? Have you? Kokichi agreed, but he wanted to let his piece be known before he continued on to follow the special grade sorcerer's plan. Have you ever heard of the phrase "and pride cometh before the fall"? He asked. Megumi paused in his place for a moment. He had even stopped petting Blizzard as he heard the question. He turned to the scarred man and answered. I have. Why? Because it sounds to me like you're pulling an Icarus here. You're flying too close to the sun, as it were. You're betting too much and playing too risky. Mechamaru stated. This prompted the special grade sorcerer to turn to him and face him head-on for his next words. When faced with everything Geto is planning with those curses, do you really think you can pull out as the victor? I will win. A few days later, 10 p.m. Tokyo Jujutsu Tech Forest. There's no way. This is actually happening. Satoru asked. He was looking utterly gobsmacked and speechless. Well, I just said so, didn't I? It's time. I'm more than strong enough to handle this. Megumi answered, stretching his body in every way possible. He currently wore a white kimono, secured by a black obi at his waist. A white hakama spread out in soft folds around him, perfectly aligned. He had chosen this attire specifically because it would be completely unrestricted for the upcoming battle. He couldn't afford to be hampered in any way. Yeah, it's just. It's been so many years since you started training for this moment, I thought it would never come. They grow up so fast. The white-haired man reminisced, reaching a finger up to his cursed eyes and wiping away a tear that had been built up. Oi! Megumi growled, cursed energy building in his body as he raised his hands into the position for the Mahoraga ritual. Calm down, Megumi, it's just a joke. No need to summon an untamed death god against him for it. Yuji placated. Trying to calm him down as from everything he's heard so far, this last Shikigami was one of legends. Throughout all of the history of Jujutsu, no user of the 10 Shadows has ever been able to subjugate this one. Not a one. In fact, he was once summoned against a user of the 6 Eyes and the Limitless Cursed technique like Satoru Gojo. And when he had slaughtered both the 6 Eyes and Limitless user as well as the user of the 10 Shadows. He is truly the strongest Shikigami known to mankind. Well, I wouldn't call him a death god, but it's certainly an overreaction. Don't use my forest if the two of you are going to fight with that thing around. I'm only letting you do this here because you've already destroyed this area. Yaga commented from afar. He was currently sitting inside a viewing platform built into the side of a nearby cliff face. The viewing platform was fortified to hell and back with as much steel reinforcements as physically possible. Some others were also sitting there to watch, including some of his students and a few others. Yuji, don't mind the blindfolded idiot, just come up here so he can start. The idiot will be fine since he's strong and the Shikigami will be focused on Megumi, but you might get in the way. Moki called out from the stands. She was wearing her old specialized glasses that allow her to see Jujutsu because she didn't want to miss this fight. Similarly, she had a high-fidelity camera by her side which was implanted with the same lens, letting it capture any sorcery occurring before it. She wasn't going to waste an opportunity to capture Megumi getting his ass beat after all. Just let him be there. I'd pay good money to watch him get his shit rocked. He's been too damn happy nowadays for my taste. He could use a good thrashing. Nobara said. She had her arms crossed in annoyance while leaning back on a couch. Oh really, Tilda? How much? Mai asked, not wasting an opportunity to get some money when possible. She was called here by Gojo in order to use her crows to allow them all to follow the battle from a safe distance. The orange-haired girl made a sound of consideration as she turned to the silver-haired woman, thinking about how much she would be willing to pay for such a thing. Calm yourself, Kujisaki. You can't hate on my brother because he is winning in life. He should enjoy a quiet, happy life as he deserves. Todo declared with all his heart, interrupting her train of thought with his prideful declaration. Careful shit for brains. You might still be half a grade higher than me, but I can still kick your ass. Nobara growled, reaching for her naginata. How feisty this young generation is, Tilda. The silver-haired sorcerer chuckled, covering her mouth with her right hand. She along with her classmates had all been recently promoted. She and Inumaki were classified as semi-grade 1, while Yuji and Moki were both classified as grade 1 sorcerers. The latter was a matter of great annoyance from the Zenin clan, but things were moved too far and too fast within the system for them to be able to stop it. It seems like Megumi's influence within the inner workings of Jujutsu HQ go further than could be expected, especially since he now has Principal Gakugunji in his pocket as well. Just let it go, Nobara, he's not worth the trouble. Moki laughed. She watched as Megumi said something to Gojo which caused the white-haired man to flinch back in fear and back off. The white-haired man walked over to Yuji and grabbed him by the shoulder before teleporting the two of them into the viewing platform. What did he say to you for you to back off and look like he put your balls in a vice? Nobara questioned, now very curious about what could have affected their teacher, her previous grievances against Todo being all but forgotten. Heck, Megumi said he'd tell Utaheim about his sugar stash and him sneaking sugar in her tea. And he knows his ass is grassed if that happens, since she despises all things sweet. Moki revealed, grinning devilishly as she did since she knew she revealed it to others that would definitely take advantage. And she was right, that piece of information grabbed the attention of 3 separate people. Principal Yaga, Mai, and Nobara Kujisaki all had expressions of deviousness. How the hell did you even hear that? Gojo shouted indignantly, annoyed at having that revealed in front of everyone else. Knowing that such information was going to be used against him repeatedly now, he could already feel his wallet getting lighter. Heavenly restriction, bitch. Now shush, he's finally gonna start soon. Moki stated, drawing their attention to the screen to watch the subjugation of the final Shikigami of the 10 Shadows. All the preparations are done, that one is already out and getting ready, and I just got an infusion of cursed energy through Tai Lung's incarnation thanks to harvesting some captured curses. It's time. Megumi solemnly brought his closed fists up. They were slightly angled upwards and extended forwards. And then, he started chanting, and as he did, darkness overtook the entire area around him, turning it into an empty void. With this treasure, I summon. In front of Megumi, countless wolves born of shadow seemed to form out of thin air, followed by sets of pure white toads forming at their sides. The wolves all collectively turned to the skies and howled. The sounds of wolves howling echoed throughout the world, announcing the descent of the Divine General. Blink, all the wolves and toads immediately vanished without a trace. And in their stead, a giant behemoth was revealed. He stood at a staggering 10 feet tall. Wrapped in countless talismans that covered every inch of his body, and strings chained around his form to restrict him even further. 8-handled sword, Divergent Scyther, Divine General, Mahoraga. The bindings around the Shikigami shattered in an instant, the talismans faded away into nothingness, and the full glory of the Divine General was unleashed unto the world for the first time in too long. The Divine General is a towering, muscular humanoid figure with 4 wings protruding from its eye sockets and a tail-like appendage extending from the back of its head. Hovering just above this is a large 8-handled wheel. Mahoraga wore black hakama bottoms and a white sash around its waist to cover most of its lower body. Image, in Discord, for a moment, there was pure silence as the void faded away and allowed light to shine through once again. Megumi and his last Shikigami stood opposite to each other, none moving an inch. So we finally meet, Mahoraga. Megumi whispered under his breath. He was feeling an almost surreal sense of nostalgia. More than a decade now it has been, since he had been reborn in this world. More than a decade of fighting tooth and nail. More than a decade of training till his body gave out on him. More than a decade of endless blood, sweat, and tears, all leading up to this second. This moment. In the end, one thing was clear to the Lord of Shadows. Now there stands nothing between me and my victory. Megumi Fushiguro grinned, a grin like no other. His crimson eyes burned with true, unadulterated joy. And then he laughed with arms spread like a madman. Come, Divine General. Today we decide who lives or dies. The ground beneath the two of them shattered in an instant. It turned into dust a moment later when a shockwave followed in their wake. The Divine General and the Lord of Shadows met in the middle. Their fist clashed together with a loud crash. The impact reverberated throughout the entire forest, sending cracks throughout its very foundations. And then they threw their fists again, and again, and again. Their fists blurred together, shockwave after shockwave being birthed from each impact. Between the two of them, it seems that for now, their physical strengths remained equal. Or rather, they were equal. Clink, the 8-handled Dharma wheel above the general's head spun once, and in response the Shikigami's physical strength increased by a wide margin. Megumi had noticed this happening and immediately jumped backwards. A huge fist crashed down where he once stood and eviscerated the ground into mulch. And there it is, the Divine General's adaptation. The reason why he is the strongest and most dangerous Shikigami in all of history. Megumi thought as he reached to summon one of his Shikigami. This was the cursed technique of Mahoraga, adaptation. The Divine General can adapt to any and all phenomena. Hair. You could say it's like a late throw-in rock, paper, scissors, no matter what you throw at him. If he doesn't die from it, he will adapt. And he will grow immune to it, to anything. It only took him 20 seconds to all but double his physical strength through adaptation. Megumi even made his hand signs while summoning the Shikigami. Not a single step was skipped. This empowered his Shikigami beyond their regular capabilities due to him performing unneeded ritual steps. Behind the black-haired sorcerer formed the Tiger Funeral, the Divine General's guard. The sight of him caused Mahoraga to pause in recognition. Despite still wishing to kill the summoner, he hadn't met his close confidant in too long. And so Funeral Tiger, now Tai Lung, spoke to his general. General Mahoraga. A pleasure to see you, after all this time. The Divine Tiger greeted with melancholy. It had truly been an age. But it is time for you to finally meet your worthy master. The Shade Lord awaits. You will fall today, I swear upon my soul. Umbra. Reforge. Amalgam. Phoenix Heart. With that declaration and his master's chanting, the funeral tiger began to morph, to change, to grow. He began to evolve into his greatest possible form. Both divine dogs plus new plus great serpent plus max elephant plus funeral tiger. Maximum merged beast. The tiger began to morph into a lion. The hair on his face, upper arms, and torso turned a dark grey color, while the long fur on his mane and forearms became a silvery white. He formed silver-colored plate mail on his chest and shoulders, with matching sharp-tipped gauntlets covering his 5-fingered hands. The skin on his snout and lips are both colored black and his face is covered in scars, the most notable ones crossing over his perpetually closed eyes. The largest had cleaved through the left side of his silver crown, before continuing down right of his forehead and over his right eye before ending at the bottom of his right cheek. Sirosh, the beast reagent. The beast reagent announced his presence with an earthquaking roar. The below sent an overwhelming shockwave throughout the forest. It instantly shattered dozens if not hundreds of trees and leveled the entire forest around them. The divine general was pushed back by the shockwave, forcing him to step back. He watched as his opponent's crimson eyes gained rings at his irises. Incarnation, tranquil deer. Megumi lowered his hands, 2 great swords slipping from his sleeves and falling into his hands. Then they both were overcome by their respective elements, crimson flames on his left and brilliant blue frost on his right. Play time's over, Mahoraga, it's time to die. The Lord of Shadows shot forwards, his beast reagent stayed at his back and rushed forwards with his master. When Megumi swung Koge, flames surged forward with his swing. The divine general met his swing with his own blade of extermination which overflowed with positive energy. Their attacks met in the middle with a loud crash, their power seeming equal for a moment, but Megumi was not fighting alone. A huge armored claw surged forwards into the divine general's winged head, grasping upon it before driving it into the ground. A crater formed from the impact as Mahoraga's head was implanted into the ground with a sickening crunch. The black-haired man didn't let this opportunity get past him as he drove his Dark Moon greatsword into his back. An explosion of frost marred the Shikigami's body. Not stopping there, he then spiked Koge through his neck and went to slice it off completely. Clink, the divine general erupted from the ground with a growl, reaching to grab the sorcerer who jumped backward with a backflip to avoid the grapple. In those mere seconds, all the injuries inflicted on Mahoraga healed along with his first adaptation to extreme temperatures. Although both of Megumi's greatsword stayed spiked into his body, not that the general cared. And so the Shikigami kept chasing the black-haired sorcerer, all without standing up from the ground. Megumi kept backflipping to avoid each and every grapple, their game of cat and mouse grinding the ground of forest into an almost liquid-like state. Is that thing swimming through the ground to get to him? Nabara screamed in disbelief. It was as if all logic was thrown out of the window within this fight. She was not alone as everyone present watched on in utter disbelief, whether it was Mai or even Satoru Gojo. They were all in awe at the sheer ridiculousness of the situation. Megumi grew a demonic grin. He felt the divine general dive through the ground once again to get to him. He then waited for him to emerge before pushing himself off of the ground and into the air, avoiding the Shikigami's next attack and swerving midair to be right above him with his legs pulled back. Incarnation, Gamma. Countless shadow tendrils shot forwards from his palms and wrapped around the general before he pulled himself towards him with blinding speeds. Megumi's feet stomped right into the hilts of both his greatswords, driving them deeper into Mahoraga's body and using that to spike him into the ground. He even went further to insert his cursed energy into both blades, prompting them to explode with their respective elements once more. Sirosh then lunged forwards with more agape. The divine lion wrapped his jaws around the general's neck and bit down to rip it apart. His armored claws then came next and started shredding his body even further. Rah! The divine general roared in rage as he was pinned down, his cursed energy firing up into an inferno before the Dharma wheel spun once again. Clink, it's no use, you lost! Megumi shouted, bringing his hands together into the hand sign for his domain expansion. Domain expansion, Chimera Shadow Garden. The endless abyss of the Lord of Shadows burst forwards and captured the divine general, behind Megumi then sprouted the core of his domain expansion. The domain barrier then closed around them all, leaving no option for retreat or escape for all combatants. The boundless expanse of void was anchored by a colossal spinal column from which sprouted countless branches born of bone and void, a fruit of which was formed at the end of each branch. Those fruits all began falling into his sea of shadows, each and every one, causing the void to shudder and bubble over. The Divine General exploded outwards, throwing Sirosh off of him. He looked around at the new environment he was in, he located his opponent and went to attack. However, before he could take a step, unimaginable agony shot through his body as his right leg was obliterated in an instant. Mahoraga was brought down to one knee. He turned to look at what could have done so much damage to him in one strike. He found the lone piercing ox. Megumi Fushiguro had the Shikigami running infinitely within his shadow in preparation for this one moment. He needed the Divine General crippled for as long as possible so he could land his final maximum technique. "I command thee, kneel!" Megumi shouted, as the void responded to his will. The entire domain shook before a veritable avalanche of merged beasts erupted from the ocean of shadows beneath the Divine General. Whether it was claw, arm, leg, tongue, or simply wrapping their bodies around him. Each one of the merged abominations grappled the Divine General. They didn't care as they were crushed and torn apart by the General. They threw their lives away happily for one purpose. All for one thing, for the will of their Lord. Clink, it's time for you to finally meet your maker, O Divine General. Megumi Fushiguro raised his hands ahead of himself and slammed his wrists together to cup them, before pulling them both to his left side. He then activated his funeral tiger incarnation, causing his crimson eyes to turn into a blinding azure before a small orb of azure cursed energy formed within his hands. Maximum technique. The black-haired sorcerer had planned to use this specific maximum technique from the start, as he knew that flames would be too simple for the Divine General to adapt to. The cursed energy within his hands began to build up further and further. The orb within his hands began to grow as it absorbed more and more energy. Kaimi. Megumi put everything he had into this attack, every single atom and molecule of cursed energy he had ever collected within his life, including all the energy he had harvested with the help of this incarnation. If this failed, he would be completely drained dry. He would die. Clink Ra. The Divine General roared once again with rage, slowly but surely starting to throw off the merged abominations. He struggled against what seemed like adamantite chains that just kept regrowing and reattaching to his body. Clink Mahoraga exploded outwards with a shockwave that pushed back all the merged beasts. He stumbled forwards to try and get to the summoner once more. Hami. Streams of cursed energy were birthed from the very atmosphere of the domain itself. They all flowed into Megumi's cupped hands. Then the domain of shadows around them started to crumble. It fell apart at the seams as Megumi drew cursed energy even from his own domain to power up his maximum technique even further. With the two of them now thrown back into the real world once again, the audience lurched forwards as they witnessed the domain crumble and reveal Mahoraga reaching for Megumi, who had his arms cupped together. The Divine General reached his right hand towards the Lord of Shadows, a last-ditch effort to stop him before he could finish charging up. However, when Itadori Yuji spotted what Megumi had in his hands, he stood up from his place in awe and screamed with the emotions of a fanboy. "Is that a Kamehameha dash? Ha!" A humongous beam filled with more cursed energy than anyone there had ever seen in their entire lives shot forwards from Megumi's hands. It devoured the Divine General whole. The beam continued even further, shooting into the skies, turning the dark moonlit sky into daytime again for a moment before the beam dissipated into nothingness. Ash and dust hung in the air. They flowed around for a moment before settling and revealing Megumi Fushiguro to be the last man standing. The wielder of the 10 shadows felt an ethereal weight settle within his abyss. Clink, the black-haired sorcerer, smiled. That smile turned into a smirk, before it then became a grin that overtook his whole face from ear to ear. Megumi raised his arms upwards into the air, relishing the sensation of the aurora of energy still sparking throughout the atmosphere. He breathed in. For the first time since he had been reborn, he felt true freedom. He felt complete, whole, perfect. He then started giggling, then laughing. Ee hee 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 ha 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 ha. The heavens themselves shook in his wake, for the impossible had been achieved. For the first time in all Jujutsu history, the 10 Shadows Cursed technique had been completed. The Divine General has been defeated. And the name of his conqueror is Megumi Fushiguro. 31st of October, 2018. Halloween night, 8:30 p.m. Are you sure? Megumi sat cross-legged on the edge of an overpass. He was currently wearing his regular Jujutsu High Sorcerer suit. With a sleeveless inner uniform and a white hari on his back which was emblazoned with the signature of his Shikigami, most prominent among them was a large 8-handled Dharma wheel on his upper back. Brah, I told you it's gonna be fine, Megumi tilde. No need to worry, I'll be in and out in 20 minutes tops. Then we can all go back home and enjoy Halloween. Gojo answered dismissively. He seemed to care more about going back home and enjoying the festivities than being here right now. Surely you can't be this dense, right? Why don't I come help you? With the two of us together we'd probably be done even sooner. Megumi insisted, trying his best to get through to the white-haired sorcerer to no avail. There's no need for all that, I'm the strongest. I work best alone anyways. The honored one declared with unbound confidence, drawing the black-haired sorcerer's ire. The Lord of Shadows growled with annoyance as his void opened up slightly, allowing a large pure white 8-handled Dharma wheel to float to the top of his head. He then just stared at Gojo Satoru's covered 6 eyes with his own eyes. No words were said, but what he meant was clear to all present. It was a challenge to the white-haired sorcerer's statement, a denial of his claim as the strongest. To that, the honored one simply removed his blindfold and looked back into his eyes with a smirk. His galactic blue irises met with burning crimson orbs as each of their cursed energy began leaking from their bodies. Both their bodies tensed as they readied to fight, causing the concentration of cursed energy in the atmosphere to soon become thick enough to be felt by any sorcerer within a mile. Both special-grade sorcerers were all too happy to throw away the mission at hand to prove their point, and for a moment it seemed like they were about to do so, but then they heard the screams within the curtain get louder. TCH. They both turned away from each other with the shared understanding that they would continue this another time. Well, whatever. If something does somehow seal me away or hurt me like you said, then I know everyone else is going to be just fine tilde. Satoru then said, starting to stretch his body in every possible direction as he did so. Oh? And how do you figure that? The black-haired man questioned, not bothering to hide the not insignificant amount of annoyance in his voice as the Dharma wheel above his head dissolved away into nothingness. Because I know they'll have you to look after them in my absence. Hearing that, Megumi Fushiguro just couldn't find it in himself to continue arguing. So he just sighed in frustration and waved him off while looking away. Fine, whatever, just go screw off and get sealed. But I reserve the right for the biggest I told you so's known to mankind. Megumi rested his head on one hand and waved him away with the other. He felt the white-haired man walk off in the direction of the subway, where the biggest concentration of cursed energy was located. Yet despite not looking in his direction, Megumi could somehow feel the man flip him off as he left. The act of which he then responded to in kind, flipping him off right back. How the hell did you know he gave you the middle finger as he walked away? You're not even looking at him. Yuji commented, utterly perplexed at what he was witnessing. Megumi had personally used his influence as a special-grade sorcerer to place him by his side for this incident. Mutated senses. He answered, reaching into his shadow and pulling out a small circular earpiece with the face of a robot on it. Indeed, Megumi Fushiguro has taken another step in his evolution following the climactic battle with the Divine General. He had evolved the Funeral Tiger mutation, which increases all of his base stats along, especially his dexterity and senses. Along with that, it has enhanced his cursed energy output greatly. Would have expected the Tranquil Deer mutation from how much I've been spamming it, but I guess they come depending on the complexity and compatibility of each one. Maybe I can only get the Deer mutation after I've already learned RCT myself. Megumi considered. He then threw the earpiece to Yuji and reached for another one. That's probably it. But man, I can feel how close I am to grasping it, the reverse cursed technique. It's right there, but no matter how much I try, I can never replicate it myself. It's like something is blocking it for me. Megumi thought with a sigh, pulling out another earpiece and wearing it, which Yuji copied. You know the plan, Yuji. The man in the earpiece will guide you where you need to go and tell you what you need to do. He reminded as he put on his one earpiece, although his was more subtle and sophisticated as it was inserted into his ear to stay out of sight so it wasn't destroyed. Osu! Yuji responded, recalling the plan Megumi told him a few minutes prior. Oh. What about me, Zenin-san? Aino asked, holding onto his shiesty with one hand and pointing at himself with the other. He was brought along with one specific purpose under the promise that if he performed as Megumi wished, he would be promoted to grade 1. Sorry, I know. I only have 2 of them. This was a lie. Puppet Master, start the evacuation. I will bring down the main curtain shortly. Megumi ordered as he pressed on his earpiece. He heard a mechanical click before a response came. Copy, starting operation as planned, sir. Over. With that, Megumi stood up from his place on the railing and motioned for the other 2 to follow him. As you heard, it's our job to bring down the main curtain that's keeping all the civilians inside, he said, leading them in the direction of the city center. Yuji, if a curtain this big is capable of keeping this many people trapped exists, then there must be some kind of binding vow in place to maintain the curtain. Can you tell me where it would be? Megumi questioned, not wasting a moment to test his friend's knowledge in Jujutsu. They most likely used a binding vow to increase the durability of the curtain, so the caster must either be outside the curtain, which leaves him open to ambush, or the anchors for the curtain are placed in an obvious spot, since increasing the risk would empower the curtain. Yuji answered dutifully, proving himself to be uncharacteristically knowledgeable about Jujutsu. Correct, so what would be the most obvious spot for the anchors to be? Megumi asked with a proud smile. His shadow was already bubbling over and forming a shikigami. To that, the 2 sorcerers beside him collectively looked up at the city skyline and locked their eyes on the tallest skyscraper within the Shibuya district, that being the Cerulean Tower, which stood at a height of 184 meters. Exactly, now get on. Let's deal with this curtain so the civilians can be evacuated. The special grade sorcerer commanded, a giant version of New being summoned from his shadow as he did. The 2 sorcerers followed his orders without any ceremony. The shikigami then took off to the skies with a mighty flap of its wings. Within mere seconds, the trio of sorcerers found themselves at the top of the building, where they immediately spotted 3 curse users. Megumi hopped off the massive shikigami, followed by Yuji and Aino, with his summon dissolving into shadows right after. The curse users then noticed their presence, turning to face them with the expression of pure surprise and horror. Itzzen in Megu an old man with an odd moustache cried out in fear when he saw him. However, he was unable to continue speaking as the special grade sorcerer disappeared from his place faster than he could blink, appearing right beside him and merely backhanding him in the chest. The old man coughed blood immediately and was shot off of the skyscraper, sending him falling all the way down 41 stories, which would presumably kill him. Megumi then turned to face the shivering old woman who reached for her prayer beads, her grandson who was by her side grabbing a small vial of blood in preparation to eat it. He then pointed a finger in their direction. The finger then built up some cursed energy at its tip and fired off in their direction. A flash of blackish blue cursed energy fired off as a thin beam of energy shot forwards at blinding speeds. Death beam! But instead of hitting them, the beam struck an anchor that was implanted on the ground, causing them to balk in surprise that he had both decided to spare them from what would have been a quick death, and he had managed to spot one of the 3 anchors of the curtain. I know, you're up. If you can take care of the old hag and the clown next to her, I'll make you a grade 1 sorcerer. Megumi said with a blank expression that hid what he was truly feeling inside. Sorry my guy, you're gonna get crushed. But I want to meet my father at least once, so you're gonna have to be the sacrifice for that. He thought, feeling a sense of apologetic amusement at setting up the shiesty sorcerer for a humiliating defeat. However, he isn't one to get someone killed for his own curiosity, so he proceeded to implant new into the sorcerer's shadow right after his command, just to be sure that he could get him out should his life be in danger.
Oh? That's it?
I can totally do that, Zenin-san.
Leave it to me.
Aino declared with misplaced confidence, drawing collective sighs from the curse user duo at hearing that they wouldn't be facing Megumi. If it's just this random sorcerer, then that's fine, but thankfully that monster isn't interested in us. The old lady thought with relief. To her, Megumi Fushiguro was the exact same as Satoru Gojo. As both of their births had caused the world's balance to be altered, robbing her of her freedom. I still want to know how you do the beam things with cursed energy. Gojo-sensei can't explain it or even do it as well as you can. Yuji complained, thinking back to his death beams. It's not that hard. It's just a matter of practice and cursed energy output. I'll teach you more about it later on. For now, let's focus on the mission at hand. The black-haired man answered. I'll hold you to that. All right, Yuji, the old man is still alive and he took the last 2 anchors with him. We'll go down and kill him, then destroy the anchors which would free the civilians. Megumi stated, walking away towards the edge of the building with his friend following him.
Who?
How'd he survive the fall? Isn't this like 200 meters up in the sky? Yuji questioned, not understanding the logistics behind that. He has a cursed technique that lets him ignore any damage that isn't above or below a certain threshold. He answered as he reached the edge of the skyscraper. How'd YA know that? The pink-haired man asked as he stood by his side. Just trust me. When you're as strong as I am, simple things like this are easy to figure out. Megumi assured, enjoying the feeling of the soft breeze flowing through his hair as he calculated the fall down to the bottom. That's simple to you. Yuji thought incredulously before getting closer to him and asking him another question. Okay. So how do we follow him down? You gonna summon new again? Nah, just jump. 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 That was all Yuji heard before he felt a hand press against his back and push him off the 184-meter-tall skyscraper, causing him to scream in terror as he began his sudden descent to the ground. Dash! Megumi smirked slightly and followed him by simply stepping off the building with his hands in his pocket. He fell down faster than the pink-haired man before him due his higher weight from his bigger body and the multitude of objects in his inventory. Dash! The black-haired sorcerer reached the same elevation where his friend was currently at and decided to give him some advice from the kindness of his heart. Calm down, reinforce your legs with cursed energy. But it seems that said advice was lost on the young sorcerer, who continued flapping his arms like a baby bird who was forced to learn to fly by its mother. Megumi sighed in slight disappointment and simply turned around mid-fall while his hands were still in his pockets and faced the ground with his legs, which were then reinforced heavily with cursed energy. He landed on the ground with a loud crash, the ground beneath him being reduced to a crater from his impact. Removing one of his hands from his pocket, he then swiped off some dust from his body and reached it to the side as if expecting something. And right on cue, Itadori Yuji came falling down to the ground where he would at the very least break multiple bones. Thankfully, Megumi grabbed him with one hand and stopped his descent without breaking a sweat. The vessel stopped screaming and just hung there by his jacket as he greedily took in breath while trying to calm himself after having just fell down what was a lethal fall. You didn't calm down, Megumi stated before letting go of him and letting him fall down on his ass with a small "oh." Well, excuse me for panicking a little while falling down from a skyscraper, Itadori shouted in indignance at the ridiculous expectation unwillingly placed on him. If you say so, the black-haired man replied before raising his hand and pointing a finger at the old curse user who was playing dead in hopes that the special grade sorcerer wouldn't notice and he could escape. Death beam. The blackish-blue beam of concentrated cursed energy shot towards the curse user and pierced him straight through the head, granting him an undeserved quick death. He then shot another 2 beams which disintegrated the last 2 curtain anchors. Yuji Itadori frowned at the death of the curse user, despite knowing that he must have done many terrible things and he would have done the same to him in a heartbeat. It was simply his base nature to be unconditionally caring to all those around him, even if they don't deserve it. It was an odd yet admirable heroic trait for a Jujutsu sorcerer to have. You shouldn't feel too bad for the old bastard. I recognize him from an old report. He once skinned an innocent civilian while he was still alive. He deserved worse. Megumi informed, looking up to the sky and watched as the biggest curtain was dissolving. Yuji felt a weight be removed from his chest upon hearing that his suspicions were confirmed. He looked up at the sky too and watched as 2 more curtains started dissolving a few seconds after the biggest one had. The 2 of them then heard a loud clicking sound from their earpieces, followed by a report from the Puppet Master. "This is Puppet Master. The operation is a success so far. 2 of the subcurtains have been neutralized and 30% of the civilians have been evacuated with the help of Jujutsu HQ and many sorcerers. Over. Good work. Proceed with the last 2 curtains with the help of Mai and Nanami. Be sure to prioritize clearing out 200 meters around the Shibuya crossing as planned, just in case I need to use it later on." Megumi ordered. "Copy that. I have another report regarding special grade curses. The curse known as Mojito has been spotted entering a crowded train leading to Shibuya Station. Over." Now that news made both sorcerers grimace with pity. If he was spotted there, then the people within that train are probably already dead and violated into becoming transfigured humans. This news especially affected Itadori Yuji, who gritted his teeth and clenched his fists in rage. "Yuji, you go off to the subway ahead of me and find Mojito. Kill him and save as many people as possible. I know you can handle it." The special grade sorcerer ordered, knowing that this specific curse was a personal matter to him. "Got it." The vessel of the strongest sprinted away with a cloud of dust right at his tail. He was a man with a mission. A mission to exorcise a curse that should not be allowed to exist. Megumi heard another click in his ear as Puppet Master gave him another report, one which he expected but still caused him to sigh in annoyance and frustration. Looks like Lady Fate had her mind made up, huh? Well, whatever, we still have contingency plans for this. Be sure to let everyone know what happened. Tell them to keep it on the down low so any curse users who aren't in the loop don't know it. He ordered while rubbing his forehead to relieve an incoming headache. "Copy that, sir." With a soft crackle, Megumi Fushiguro was left alone once again. He sighed again for what seemed like the 20th time today and marched off towards the Shibuya station, specifically the Inokashira Line Avenue gate. "I guess it's time to deal with Dagon then Jogo. I need to grab those Suguna fingers off of him so I can give them to Yuji over time. It would have been annoying if they were still with HQ, but this way I can feed them to him whenever." The special grade sorcerer muttered under his breath before he started sprinting forwards with incredible speeds. 5 minutes prior. In a Shibuya subway. I should have taken Megumi's help. That was all Gojo Satoru could think as a train full of transfigured humans arrived at their stop. The mechanical doors opened up. A human-looking curse with long blue hair and patchwork scars emerged from them with uncanny happiness and cheer. "Yo, what's up, Jogo? Choso! I'm here!" It called out, animatedly announcing its presence with unnatural movement that should be impossible to do with a human body. "You're late, Mojito." He already killed that man's 2 freaks. They were special grade, but he killed them effortlessly even without his cursed technique. He is truly a monster. The curse now known as Jogo answered, rubbing his neck as a phantom pain formed there. What does he mean, freaks? They were curses just like him, although they looked slightly off from what an average special grade curse looked like. Who's that man? Gojo thought, overhearing their conversation. What looked like a curse user grunted at the sight of Mojito as he raised his arm. It was damaged severely and looked like it was crushed by something. And then to the surprise of Gojo, he saw the arm that he broke start to mend itself. That death painting can use RCT too. Shit, I can't fight properly with these many people being thrusted around. The patchwork freak also brought those transfigured humans here too. They'll kill everyone if I don't do something. Satoru Gojo started grilling his enhanced mind in order to find a solution to save as many lives as possible while making sure to kill as many of the curses as possible. And so he came up with an idea that most would consider impossible, for all except the honored one, of course. What the group of special grade curses saw next caused them to gasp in surprise and horror as all their plans were undone by a single move. F for real? Mahito questioned with horror. Satoru Gojo brought his right hand up, twisting one finger over the other, and started chanting. Domain expansion, infinite void. A streaming infinite cosmos formed around the entire area for a split second before it was immediately dissolved and undone. This was the Honored One's plan, his gambit. A 0.2-second domain expansion. A feat that was only possible with the absolute knowledge of Jujutsu sorcery he held, the nearly impossible feat of expanding your domain's barrier and applying its sure hit within the same instant. The effects were instant. Every living being, including the special grade curses, inside the station was completely unconscious. The Honored One blurred ahead with inhuman speeds. Wherever he went, gore and blood went flying. Due to the limited effect of a 0.2-second domain expansion on a special grade curse, his targets were limited to only the approximately 1,000 transfigured humans which were released into the station. And in the 299 seconds following his domain expansion, Satoru Gojo had slaughtered each and every transfigured human which was released into the station, leaving most of the non-sorcerers still unconscious but safe for now, and the special grade curses as the last opponent standing. The white-haired man held the heads of 2 transfigured humans. He was breathing in and out laboredly after accomplishing a feat which would be impossible for any other sorcerer alive, and was readying himself to finish the fight by killing the last 3 curses. But it was then that he spotted an odd box on the ground near him. It was covered up completely with talismans, but despite all that, it was brimming with so much cursed energy it must have been a special grade cursed tool. Prison Realm. Gate open. The cube opened into a mass of flesh stretched out by 4 corners with the remains of the cube at the edges. It had a giant bleeding eye in the middle with stitches keeping it open. It looked as if the eye was staring into his very soul. The Honored One stepped back. Although he wasn't sure what he was looking at, his 6 eyes told him enough for him to know that it was fatally dangerous and he needed to get away from it now. And was about to, if only he didn't then hear a hauntingly familiar voice from behind him. One which stalked both his brightest dreams and his darkest nightmares. Yo! Satoru! Who? What stood there was someone who he thought had died at the hands of his students, a death that was put into question by Megumi himself. It's been a while. It was Suguru Geto, the black-haired monk who waved his hand gently at him with a smile, his familiarly kind voice as soft and warm as the day he first met him. He's not dead? Megumi was right. Yuta failed to finish him off. The Honored One deduced, his fabled 6 eyes burned with cursed energy as they tried to find any indication of him being a fake. The 6 eyes could not find a single fault in his body. It's him! And then the 3 years of his youth came flooding into his brain. The cursed object known as the Prison Realm shot forwards towards the distracted sorcerer, latching onto him irreparably as its conditions had been met. The conditions for this unbreakable seal are simple. In order for the target to be sealed, they must be kept within a 4-meter radius for a minute's worth of time within their mind for the cursed object to take hold. And although it had only been an instant, for Satoru Gojo, 3 years had already passed. Wait, shit. I can't feel my cursed energy. This is checkmate. Satoru thought, feeling all power leave his body as he was left helpless by the cursed object. My. You shouldn't let your mind wander during a battle, Satoru tilde. He turned to face the man before him. Despite being undoubtedly Suguru Geto, his soul now rejected that possibility completely. Who the hell are you? I know this isn't Suguru. Despite everything, he would never do this. So who the heck are you? Gojo demanded. Yeesh tilde? Suguru Geto chuckled, reaching a hand to a scar spanning across his face and pulling it open by unwinding a surgical thread. How'd you know? What Satoru Gojo laid his eyes on was an abomination of nature. Suguru Geto opened up his skull like a toy and revealed a cursed brain inside. It had a demented grin that held promises of unnatural and untold horrors beyond human comprehension. "My name is Kenjiku. This is the work of my cursed technique which allows me to take over any body I desire. And of course I retain its cursed technique. I coveted Suguru Geto's curse manipulation, so I took his body. Thankfully, your students did quite a terrible job at finishing him. It was almost too easy." Despite himself, Satoru Gojo found himself cursing his students' inability to just finish off their opponent and make sure they died. "But don't worry, Satoru tilde. I'll unmake the seal in about 1,000 years. You're just too strong for my plans to continue in your presence." Kenjiku monologued, taking great pride in his feat of capturing the honored one. "Heh." Kenjiku paused at the white-haired man's laugh, prompting him to continue on. "I don't care about any of your classic supervillain monologues. Your plans will fail. Megumi will be sure to kill you for me like he did before. I bet you won't even be breathing by the time it's the sunrise." Satoru Gojo declared with an assured, smug smile. Him. He isn't the next you despite what the mindless sheep say. Do you honestly think he could take care of everything this world will throw at him in your absence? He will fail. Kenjiku denied with a look of disgust before commanding the cursed object to proceed with sealing the honored one. "Gate close." Satoru Gojo was only able to speak 3 words before he was sealed away, a declaration of absolute faith in who he considered to be his little brother. Nah, he'd win. Megumi jumped through the air with grace as he landed at the bottom of a stairwell that led towards the innermost parts of the subway station. He started sprinting ahead just as he landed. He decided to run ahead with closed eyes, relying on his enhanced senses to lead him forwards as he focused his mind on mapping out the contents of the station and finding out who is inside these winding halls. Alright, that's Yuji and Choso. Looks like the fight is pretty even for now, so I'll just trust him to handle it. And that's Dagon, I believe. Considering the spike of cursed energy, he must have used his domain about a minute ago. Megumi thought, a black map of the station being formed in his head with red dots signifying enemies and blue dots signifying allies. His body reached to a split hallway leading to 2 separate sectors of the subway. He unconsciously reached for a pillar to his right and used it as leverage to throw himself ahead through the air feet first in order to get to his target even faster. I can't feel Mahito at all. Patch-faced bastard must be hiding and collecting whatever humans he can get since they're being evacuated by Mechimaru and the others. I can also vaguely feel what must be Jogo's signature on the horizon approaching Dagon. I gotta go kill him quick. Megumi deduced. He figured that it would take too long to just run between the winding corridors, so he decided to take a more direct approach. Incarnation, piercing ox. His cursed energy fired up as bony growths covered his arms in the form of gauntlets. He could feel his bone density rise significantly. Then the feeling of a new cursed technique being engraved into his body flooded him. He immediately noticed the difference as the longer he ran or moved in a certain direction, the higher his cursed energy output rose and the stronger he became. Megumi raised his arms into an X shape ahead of him and began to sprint ahead directly to Dagon's signature. Utilizing this incarnation for the most obvious application came naturally to him, as instead of taking the long way around, he simply ran through the steel-reinforced concrete walls of the subway as if they weren't there. Wall after wall was reduced to rubble as he ran through them like a bulldozer, growing faster and stronger by every second that passed. Within 20 seconds, he had already reached a large hall where he felt remnants of cursed energy and a scarred battlefield. And in the middle of the clearing was a small spherical domain barrier form which he felt the spike of cursed energy that led him here. Before doing anything else, Megumi raised a hand to his ear and activated his earpiece again. Puppet Master, come in. What's the status of the main operation? He heard a small clicking sound from his earpiece before he was then answered. Evacuation is at 54%, casualties are minimal. The last 2 subcurtains have been felled. About a few dozen curses and transfigured humans are captured so far, with the rest being culled. Subject S is reported to have started restoring any injured sorcerers. 100% clear rate of Shibuya crossing has been confirmed as well. Over. I see. Good work on everything. Focus on the evacuation for now. Capture curses when convenient, not each one. I'll be going offline for a bit. Talk later. Megumi ordered, walking right up to the domain barrier and raising his hands into a familiar pose. Copy that. And? Godspeed, sir. It's nice having reliable minions. Megumi muttered under his breath, charging up his cursed energy as he did before chanting. Domain expansion, Chimera Shadow Garden. A flood of darkness rushed forwards. Within an instant it had pierced through the domain barrier ahead of him. And although he didn't fully manifest his own domain yet, the barrier ahead of him was pulled open, revealing the inside of it. The domain of the disaster-cursed Dagon looked to be a sunny, almost picturesque tropical island. Where Megumi entered the domain was on top of an ocean where his shadows flooded over the water, painting the idyllic waters an abyssal black. Everyone within the curse's domain turned to look at the disturbance, his entrance into the domain, as he had caused a domain clash to begin, stopping the sure-hit effect of Dagon's domain in its tracks. The sorcerers had immediately noticed the lull in attacks from the domain's sure-hit and took advantage in getting some distance, with each having widely different reactions to his appearance. But Megumi ignored them all for a moment as he looked at the main threat at that moment, or should he say the two main threats. Dagon was the only one he recognized. Dagon had a humanoid shape, similar to Hanami. His head changed to a shape reminiscent of an octopus with black dots on the top, along with blank white eyes. He was mostly red, including the outer portions of his arms, thighs, hips, and chest. The inner sections of those areas of his body were tan. His midsection was black and he had wings on his lower back that allowed him to levitate. What he didn't recognize was the curse which wrapped itself around Dagon's body like a facehugger. It looked to be another aquatic special grade curse. The only way to describe it would be a miniaturized blue kraken. It had a huge head which acted as its main body and long, almost unending tentacles which it used to protect Dagon from any would-be attackers. This was the reason the duo of curses were still breathing within the presence of Moki. Dagon focused on the offense while the kraken focused on the defense. It was truly a brilliant plan on the hand of the special grade curses. It was then that he tuned back into the shouts of the sorcerers he had come into the domain to save in the first place, first being Naobito Zenin. Finally! I got a real combatant who could actually help me here. Zenin Megumi, come to my side and protect me now. Naobito called out with glee. It was obvious that he didn't consider his comrades in this battle to be worth anything despite being saved by them countless times. This order was completely and utterly ignored. Megumi just looked the old sorcerer up and down, noting that he had lost his right arm during the battle at some point. He turned to the others to assess their damage, starting with Nanami. Ah. It's good to see that you're safe, Fushiguro-kun. Unfortunately, it seems we have to rely on you to save us this time. How embarrassing for us. The blonde-haired man muttered with only a few marks on his body, glad that they were saved but loathed himself for forcing children to pick up the slack for his failings. Moki looked to be untouched and incredibly happy at seeing that he had come. She immediately grabbed Nanami and reluctantly grabbed Naobito as well before pulling them towards his part of the domain clash where they would be safe and out of the way. She threw them hastily at the ground by Megumi's feet, drawing an annoyed grunt from the Zenin clan head. She then started talking quicker than both grade 1 sorcerers could comprehend, although Megumi understood her just fine despite that. Nice to see you here, Megumi. These curses have been a pain in my ass. The red one keeps using its sure-hit to attack these two, forcing me to stay back and protect them, while the blue one keeps using its regenerating tentacles to just face tank my attacks. It's bullshit. Can you give me an opening to hit them? One clear shot is all I need. Moki asserted, walking a few steps ahead of them with Dragonbone held in both hands. I see. Megumi muttered as he absorbed all the information. Shit. That's Megumi Zenin. He's the one that killed Big Sis Hanami. Dagon called out, fear for his life being implanted into him at the sight of the special grade sorcerer. The miniature blue kraken on his shoulder squelched and vibrated as it spoke in a language that only marine life could understand. Don't worry, Dagon, look at him. His domain isn't getting any ground against yours, he's weak. He must have used dirty tricks against Hanami. You can kill him easily. Kraken assured, acting as a moral support for the still young disaster curse. Why yeah. You're right. I can kill him easily. Dagon shouted, being filled with confidence once again. However, said confidence was false and misguided. Sounds easy enough. Megumi simply said, seeming almost bored. He then willed his domain expansion to be fully manifested as a colossal sky-scraping spinal column formed behind him. From the top of the column sprouted countless branches born of bone and void, with fruits being formed right after. For seconds was all it took for the endless abyss within Fushiguro Megumi to completely overwrite Dagon's domain expansion. Everyone within the domain was thrust into an almost nightmarish version of reality, one which the Lord of Shadows ruled over entirely. SSHIT. You lied to me. Dagon cried out in fear, prompting the Kraken on his neck to try its best to calm him again. So this is the fully realized domain of the 10 Shadows user, huh? Naobito mumbled with awe. It was the first time he or any of his clansmen had the chance to witness this innate domain with their own eyes in hundreds of years. The youth continued to surprise me every day. Nanami sighed, unsure of what to think, but he was at least happy that things were going their way. He then looked around, and was surprised when he didn't see Moki anywhere. Where the hell did she go? He wondered. His attention was stolen when he saw 10 fruits fall down from the skies of the domain. Not even a second later, both Dagon and Kraken were immediately spiked and run through by 10 different amalgamations. Not given even a second to move and defend themselves from the effect of Fushiguro Megumi's domain expansion. D-damn. I can't move. Cursed technique is be burned out. Dagon cried out in agony. He struggled against the hold of the Shikigami, but it was ultimately hopeless. As from behind the 2 special grade curses, Moki Zenin appeared as if from thin air. She drew Dragonbone backwards, before swinging it ahead with all her strength while activating its ability as she did, causing jets of energy to spark from its hilt. Stay still, I've been meaning to get me some sashimi for some time now. Squelch in one swing of her blade, both Dagon and his comrade were both torn in half right down the middle. She then swung her blade 3 more times, each at a different angle. Once from right to left, once from the top left to bottom right, then finally 1 more time from bottom left to the top right. The result? Both special grade curses fell apart into cubes of flesh. Their deaths were instant and painless. An undeserved mercy. Well, that's that. Time to move on to the volcano head. Megumi mumbled under his breath before willing his domain to fade away so he could conserve energy. Naobito Zenin looked up for a moment as the domain began to dissolve away, trying to take in as much of it as possible while he could. But something caused him to gasp in shock at the very top of the domain. Above even where the colossal spinal column could reach, in the only source of light within this domain of infinite darkness. He saw the silhouette of something that made his knees quake in awe, excitement, and terror. It was a pure golden 8-handled Dharma wheel. Is that his wheel? The head of Zenin clan turned to who he wished to be his heir with complete and utter shock, finding him to not even be paying attention to him and instead focusing on sensing cursed energy. Where's this bastard? Oh wait. Is that? God damn it. How the hell did Yuji lose to Choso? I can't feel Jogo anywhere nearby. Is he? Despite all of his plans, Fushiguro Megumi made 2 critical miscalculations. First, he assumed that Itadori Yuji would win against the death painting known as Choso. He was wrong. He did not account for the possibility of Choso developing the reverse cursed technique, which played a significant role in the battle. Itadori Yuji lost the battle and was knocked out. Second, he assumed that the disaster curse known as Jogo would come to kill the sorceress that killed Dagon as he did back in his old life. He was wrong. He did not account for the possibility of Jogo being so fearful of both his and Zenin Moki's presence, that he chose to simply ignore the possibility of killing them and instead chose to go to Ryman Sukuna's vessel. I see, even with all my plans, I never considered a curse to think in such a human way as for him to fear the two of us so much he never bothered coming to avenge his friend. Truly, the most human curse, huh? Now Sukuna will be awakened again sooner than I'd have liked, at a higher finger level than before. Megumi snapped out of his thoughts, racking his brain to think of what to do in this situation. He completely ignored Zenin Naobito's attempts at getting his attention and reached for his earpiece, hearing a loud click a moment later. Change of plans then. Puppet Master, do you hear me? Yes, sir, I copy. How's the evacuation going? And is the area around Shibuya Crossing ready for use? He asked, biting his other hand's finger as he did. Evacuation of the Shibuya district is at 66%. Most civilians have been removed barring a few that are still being moved out of the subway. So far about 80 meters around Shibuya Crossing are confirmed to be fully cleared and ready for use. Over. Well then let's hope to God Sukuna takes his time playing with Jogo and that it'll all be enough in the end. Good work. Get back to it. I'll contact you when needed. Copy that, sir. Megumi heard another click in his ear before turning around and facing Naobito, who was trying to get his attention for the past minute. Finally! Megumi Zenin, did you or did you not subjugate the Divine General? He demanded. Yes, I did. Now shut it for a second. Megumi confirmed as he tried to think, drawing a look of awe from the head of the Zenin clan who could not comprehend the reality of what he just heard. Truly? I knew you would be the one to save this society and dethrone the Gojo clan as the leading Jujutsu clan. Hava hava. The clan head laughed with joy. It seems that the waste of Zenin blood at Tojik had been worth every bit of headache and time he had spent or dealt to their clan. Hold that thought. Moki, kill him. Megumi ordered coldly while turning away. Eh? Gerg dash. Naobito Zenin couldn't even breath for more than a second before a dagger pierced through the back of his throat, blood spurted out of his neck like a geyser. The old sorcerer fell to his knees in agony as he reached his hands to his throat in his confusion and surprise. Oh Tilda? You don't need to ask me twice. I've been dreaming of this moment for years, Tilda. Moki sighed, walking behind Naobito with an almost sadistic smile even as blood splashed on her face. She reached a hand to the mouth of the purple curse on her body, pulling out a high-quality serrated blade from it. Do what you want to him, just make sure the body is recognizable and it looks like he died to a curse. Oh, and dump it somewhere the Zenin clan will see. Megumi said dismissively, waving a hand backwards and walking in Nanami's direction. Fushiguro-kun, see, can you please at least explain why you killed him? The blonde-haired man mumbled in horror. He just didn't understand why this was necessary. Don't bother feeling bad for him, Kento-san. He's more of a monster than most curse users are. He just knows how to hide it better. His death was set in stone decades ago. This was just karma coming in to take its due. The black-haired sorcerer answered with his hands still in his pockets. He walked past the shocked Grade 1 sorcerer and stopped for a moment, before turning around and looking him from the corner of his eye. You don't need to worry about right and wrong right now, Kento-san. There's still innocent people that need to be saved, curses that need to be killed. What we need is a sorcerer, so please help us save as many lives as possible. And maybe take a vacation soon, you look like shit. With that, Megumi Fushiguro kept walking off with his hand still in his pockets, leaving behind an almost shell-shocked Nanami. Yo! Megumi! HM. Megumi stopped and turned around to face the source of the voice, finding it to be Moki, whose foot was currently crushing the head of the still living but soon-to-be former leader of the Zenin clan. What is it? He asked, kind of annoyed that she ruined what was supposed to be a cool exit. What are YA gonna go do now? Need any help? She asked, although she was enjoying herself currently she knew that there could be bigger and more important things to do at the moment. Oh. It's nothing. Just gonna go meet an old friend, ciao. With that, Megumi left the group, now duo of sorcerers, behind as he went to meet someone who he considered an old friend. 1 minute later. There you are. Megumi muttered under his breath with satisfaction. He was down on one knee and resting his hand on the other while looking at something. He laid his eyes on the object, or rather the person of his interest. He was a tall, muscular man with mid-length straight black hair that reached to his ears. His eyes are green with oddly pitch black scleras, and he has thin black eyebrows and a scar on the corner of his right lip. He wore a loose white sweater along with black pants and black shoes. The sorcerer killer. Or should I say, father. The man with a body so godly, its sheer power overrode the soul of its host when they tried to use it through a seance technique. The man with a heavenly restriction and skill so great, he almost killed Satoru Gojo, the honored one. The man who had made him, his biological father. Toji Fushiguro. The sorcerer killer's eyes shot upwards to where he stood, his heaven restriction allowing him to hear even the quietest noise. He all but disappeared from his place with a gust of air, leaving a crater on the ground in his wake. Toji was not in his right state of mind at the moment. The out-of-control seance technique had removed his sense of self. He has been reduced to a puppet of carnage which seeks to kill the strongest living being around. And at the moment, that is his son, Fushiguro Megumi. Toji appeared before his son with fist held back, ready to throw a haymaker strong enough to puncture through carbon-alloyed steel. This amount of power and speed is enough to annihilate even special-grade curses without even a sweat. It would even kill grade 1 sorcerers before they could even blink. It was suicidal to even try. Fearing the sorcerer killer was an ironclad rule to all Jujutsu sorcerers. However, that same rule does not apply to Fushiguro Megumi. Megumi weaved his body to the side as he could see every single movement his father made, from the twitching of his fingers to the tensing of his leg muscles before he even moved. The Lord of Shadows grabbed Toji's arm with his own and pulled him to the side, pulling back an arm as he did before throwing a brutal haymaker into his opponent's face. A shockwave reverberated from the impact of his fist, shattering the glass of the nearby railings. The force of the punch didn't stop there as the still mid-air Toji Fushiguro was then sent flying away. He crashed through the glass wall of the subway station and flew out into the street. Megumi jumped right after him and landed a few feet away, relishing the sensation of his fist meeting his father's face even for a moment. Bringing his arm to his grinning face, he observed the slight mark left on his knuckles. It was as if he had punched solid steel. But he still watched on in amusement as Toji got back up to his feet mostly uninjured, but rubbing the face of his stolen vessel. The wielder of the heavenly restriction had the expression of someone remembering something they had forgotten for too long. Outplaying the sorcerer killer in hand-to-hand combat was a feat considered to be impossible for all sorcerers, ever since his reign of terror over the Jujutsu society over a decade ago. It was seen as unrealistic and impossible for all, except for Fushiguro Megumi, of course. For he is the shepherd of fire, the man who shall remake this world into his image. He is Megumi.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.